OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
Hello, very good morning to you. Welcome along. It's Wednesday morning. That's our public service done for the day. It is the 27th of January. I had to check that there. Eoin Sheahan, good morning to you. Happy Wednesday, sir.
Happy Wednesday indeed. How are things?
Well, not as good as life is for you as an Arsenal fan. You're now ahead of Villa in the table. Mighty Arsenal.
It seems like Aston Villa are going to have 20 games in hand on everybody as long as the season progresses. We're never going to get to a point where Aston Villa play those extra games. I've decided that. So, yes, I'm cashing in now and saying that Arsenal are officially back to being better than Aston Villa.
By the end of the season, we'll still have those games in hand. That if we won, we would have been crowned champions, but we didn't, and therefore we're virtual champions. A bit like we're virtual champions this morning, waking up to the news that that goal that Man City scored was illegal. I feel great about this. Yeah. I'm morally correct.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah. You can certainly add that in. Like it sort of feels like this is like a Nate Silver 538 moment where they're trying to figure out statistically what will happen in certain swing states during a United States election. This is what's happening with Aston Villa at the moment. If the offside law was of February 2021 rather than January 2021, they would have one more point than they currently have. If they fulfilled all their games, they would have probably maybe six more points than they currently have. So give yourself 7 points extra, Villa fans, this morning is what I'm saying.
Well, just briefly, right? So the narrative now is, after Man City absolutely annihilating West Brom last night, the narrative now is that nothing can stop, absolutely nothing. Now that they've beaten West Brom, nothing can stop Man City. It's finished. But Villa were on the precipice of at least drawing with them. If that goal hadn't been given, I suspect the second goal might not have been scored. Well, you never know. It's a sliding doors moment in the game. You can't really tell. Goals change games, as we all know. However, it was 79 minutes in, and Villa looked very comfortable, and all of a sudden the ridiculous goal gets given against them and their manager gets sent off. I don't know if Manchester City are the unstoppable juggernaut that... I think they're the best team in the league. I think it's more likely than not that they'll win. But just because they beat West Brom last night, I'm not crowning them. And just because they've won the last... there are those matches where other teams will have an opportunity against them, and I think we need to, for the sake of a title race, we need to hold out hope for it. But I don't want to gloss over Arsenal. You can't yarrow away this. Arsenal are they've come through their blip. That's all one of the most important things a team can do.
It's important for the manager, definitely, and I think that obviously we've seen from Chelsea over the last couple of days that some managers just will never be given the opportunity to get through a blip, but they seem to get through this one okay. Now the thing is, it's just, I guess, testament to how fickle everybody is with modern football, that if they had lost that game last night, knives would have been out for Mikel Arteta again, because they had lost to Southampton on Saturday in the FA Cup. But because they won last night, people are like, oh, he's a genius because he played a half-baked team against Southampton on Saturday. And as a result of them winning last night, people are like, oh, he got that one right. But in actual fact, probably playing a half-baked team on Saturday was a poor call. If you don't want to win a game of football, just play your B team. Just don't give me this half A team, half B team crap, which is what he served up on Saturday. So I think that there would have been a lot of blowback to Arteta. They lost last night. He's doing a good job, in my opinion. And I think Premier League wise, they've obviously had a good month. But this was always going to be the month where they needed to deliver, because their fixtures were relatively straightforward. They're like Southampton away is not a straightforward fixture, but they were easier fixtures than December. Next up now, and to crown off January, the fixture that I circled in my calendar at the start of 2021, Manchester United, 5:30 on Saturday night. This is the fixture that I guess in a weird way was supposed to define Arsenal season at the start, where they had got their defence together after a shaky enough start and beat Manchester United 1-0. 1-0 to the Arsenal. Roy Keane was giving out about them on Sky Sports, and this was supposed to be, this vindication of Arteta. Roy Keane ended up being right. What he was saying about Arsenal being poor in their win that night was totally correct, because their results...
That's not what Tim Cahill said. Tim Cahill said something about something. And I was laughing at Keane, I remember. And everybody was laughing. I was actually, Tim Cahill, it sounds like he has a sense. It sounds like there's some sense to his point here. It sounds a little bit like, geez, Roy's on a sticky wicket here. But then ultimately, Arsenal at that stage were actually just a souffle primed to collapse.
Correct, yep. Now, they had the Thomas Partey injury straight away afterwards, and they were still trying to negotiate with a Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang who was totally out of form. But the really positive thing from last night is that Aubameyang was missing, Kieran Tierney was missing, And all of a sudden you've got Cedric, who looks like the Portuguese Andy Robertson at left back, who looked like a shadow of a professional footballer on Saturday afternoon. So there is this chaos around Arsenal at the moment where okay players are performing really, really well. And then their really good players, the likes of Bukayo Saka, are now starting to hit consistent levels of excellence. I think it was his first time getting a goal and an assist in the same Premier League game last night. So that's a new milestone for him. But to be able to get a result away to Southampton without Kieran Tierney and without Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, you're dead right. You can't yarrow away that.
No, and also I think the fact that you've got the most exciting teenager in the Premier League at the moment, that's pretty amazing.
Well, this is the subject of one of the subjects of many Twitter wars between a lot of accounts that will have young professional footballers as their Twitter avatars. The sort of Saka versus Greenwood versus Foden triumvirate. Who have you got? Pick your fighter, because this really marks the football club that you support.
Well, Foden is a good bit ahead of, I would say, Greenwood for start. Like, Foden is probably at the moment very close to being a full international first choice. The other two aren't quite there yet. And Greenwood, his form, not amazing over this season. Not as good as it has been. The promise that he showed, he's still in that I'm promising as opposed to I'm starting to deliver on my promise. But the Arsenal kid, is he as good as Foden? You tell me.
I definitely think that his potential is just a little bit behind Foden, but like we're talking about Foden as a generational talent here, as the best of the entire generation. Is Saka going to be the second behind him? Is it going to be a front three where you look to the future and you say Phil Foden and Bukayo Saka are your wingers in your front three for your England attack, and that's it. It's a sort of the two locks in your team, almost kind of like how Lampard and Gerrard were your two locks midfield in the middle of the 2000s. Like, are they going to be the two best players? I definitely think that there's a possibility of that. Like, the hype around Foden's incredible, and he deserves every bit of it. I think the way he's been looked after by Pep Guardiola this season has been interesting, that his minutes have been heavily managed, and I think that'll stand to him in the long run. With Greenwood, though, I think that we're writing Greenwood out of this picture way too soon. And we've seen him at the weekend, just how explosive he can be. And he's obviously had not a great season, but the kid is young. And this is what's going to happen with all these young players, is that they're going to dip in and out of form until they actually hit their peak years. Because they might do things that make them look like they're every bit as good as the world-class players around the continent at the moment. But really, it'll take them a couple of years to actually hit that level of consistency. So, if you support any of those three teams, you're obviously unbelievably excited about the young academy prospects that have come up through your football clubs. But unfortunately, if you like one, you can't like the other two. And if you look anywhere on Twitter, you're probably going to find somebody making the case that Foden and Greenwood are both terrible simply because Saka had a goal and an assist last night. So that's unfortunately where we're at.
Pre-match, Pep Guardiola had described Sam Allardyce as a genius, and then he whooped them 5-0. So that was the big result at the top of the table that puts Man City back on 41 points and top a point clear of Manchester United. Southampton beaten at home by Arsenal 3-1 after they'd beaten them in the Cup at the weekend. Newcastle surely on the precipice of sacking Steve Bruce. Newcastle United 1, Leeds 2 was the full-time score there. But the other big story from last night is David Moyes' rebirth continues apace. Crystal Palace 2, West Ham United 3 is a result that puts West Ham up to 4th and in the Champions League spots ahead of Liverpool at the moment. Obviously, Liverpool have a game in hand, so we'll see how that goes. But in fairness to David Moyes, this is remarkable.
And they're so good to watch. 3-2 does not reflect that game last night. That could have been 6-1 to West Ham. Michail Antonio could have had a hat-trick, doesn't score once. This guy's come back from injury and he looks better than ever. You're looking at him in the first couple of games, he comes back and thinking to yourself, God, I'm almost injuring my hamstrings looking at how close this guy is coming to injuring his hamstrings on the pitch. That's how unsteady he looked. But within a couple of weeks, he has managed to get his body back to full fitness, full match fitness. He scored in his first 2 games back. As I say, could have had a hat-trick last night. He hit the post twice. And then Gaeta pulls off this incredible save in the second half from point-blank range to stop him. So, it could have been a lot worse for Palace last night. But the big story from West Ham last night, and it has been one of the big stories all season, is Thomas Souček, who has proven to be one of the great signings of the last year or so in the Premier League. Bruno Fernandes is obviously the best signing that was made last January. But Souček coming over from the Czech Republic to join David Moyes was a genius piece of business. He's got 7 Premier League goals this season as a fairly basic central midfielder. 7 league goals is also what Danny Ings has got. It's also what Marcus Rashford has got. It's also what Ollie Watkins has got. It's more than James Maddison or Sadio Mane have scored this season in the Premier League. And this is a guy who's supposed to be a boring midfielder. He has absolutely nailed the art of arriving into the box late, and he's also really good at heading home a set piece as well. He's like, in terms of midfielders that seem pretty basic to watch, he's very, very exciting. And West Ham, all of a sudden, are the team you want to look at on any given weekend.
Yeah, and I think the recovery of David Moyes' career is something that I don't think anybody would have predicted, even when he was at West Ham before and it worked out a little bit for them, and then they went their separate ways. You weren't very surprised that they went their separate ways, and the football was nowhere near as good as it is now. So, I think that at some point, the revision of David Moyes' reputation and the restoration of David Moyes' reputation it's going to be really interesting. Like, what happens next for Moyes? You know, I mean, so they sell Rice in the summer, or maybe they don't. Maybe these clubs are now rich enough that they're going to be able to give Rice the contract that he wants to stay, and all of a sudden you can have teams, you can have a relatively competitive spot on the table from 3rd to 7th or 8th every year, and it's going to be, you know, a carousel of teams who qualify for the Champions League, as opposed to the nailed on, it's one of the big 5 and there's always a 6th team who should be in that big 5 but aren't for whatever reason. So like just on the Moyes career arc now and how that's going to be spoken about, like, I think that this is probably hammering home how tough it might have been to manage Manchester United post-Ferguson. Like, you look at Jose not having a bad time at Tottenham. I think there was a similar level, like relatively speaking, of an attitude around Jose Mourinho after Manchester United, where we thought he'd kind of been finished. His second stint at Chelsea, obviously, he wins a title in the first couple of seasons, but then starts to fade away before Manchester United. Like Moyes at United, the Sociedad debacle where he goes undoes Trez in his first press conference, and then Sunderland after that. You could probably make a case that those 3 jobs for Moyes weren't ideal gigs for him. Granted, if you do 3 bad jobs in a row, you probably deserve to get a little bit of criticism. But maybe there stranger things have happened than actually saying he was a good manager just in a bad position in those 3 periods. Yeah, we'll come back to this a little bit later on. Yeah. OTB AM live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. We'll speak with Christian Falk in a moment, but Phil is with us. Phil, good morning to you.
How are you doing, Ger? How are you doing, Noel?
I guess they're starting with the football last night.
Yeah, obviously Manchester City, top dogs at the moment. I think a lot of people expect them to be top of the league when the season finishes, but they're a point ahead of Manchester United after their 5-0 win away to West Brom last night. Ilkay Gundogan scored a couple of goals to continue his good scoring record. Obviously the second goal, bit of controversy around that, the Cancelo goal, because the flag goes up, play goes on, ball goes in the net, and they check VAR and it showed that Bernardo Silva wasn't actually offside. So this is why people might give out about the flag going up very late, but this is why it goes up late, because you got to let the play go out just to make sure goals aren't chalked off when they could actually be given. So that's what happened last night, and this obviously came off the back of the Premier League explaining the goal from last week between Villa and City, that if that happens again, there's a good chance it'll be ruled out. So it seems the offside decisions, people think now are starting to go in City's favour, but look, they were absolutely dominant, and after the game, Big Sam kept the players in the changing room for an hour. So that's where West Brom are at the moment. You mentioned West Ham there, up to 4th place, great 3-2 win away to Crystal Palace. Thomas Soucek scored twice for the Hammers. What a season he's having. Arsenal came from a goal down to beat Southampton 3-1 at St Mary's. Pepe, Saka and Lacazette with the goals for the Gunners. They're up to 8th place. They're just 5 points off the Champions League places, and they obviously play Manchester United this weekend. Newcastle lost yet again, 11 games in all competitions without a win for Steve Bruce's side. They were beaten 2-1 by Leeds, who picked up their first win of 2021. Now, Newcastle, I was watching this game, they were a lot better in the second half, but ultimately they still didn't win the game. I mentioned Manchester United, they're one of the teams in action tonight. They host bottom side Sheffield United, who, remember, have only won 1 game in the league all season. United have to win to replace City at the top. Probably the game to watch, though. Everton and Leicester, that's the other 8:15 kickoff, and obviously all eyes will be on Stamford Bridge at 6 o'clock. Thomas Tuchel takes charge of Chelsea for the first time when they host Wolves. Wolves have already beaten Chelsea this season. Burnley and Aston Villa also kick off at 6, and then the meeting of Brighton and Fulham is at 7:30. Also action in the Scottish Premiership. Celtic looking to avoid matching their worst league run since 1998. They've gone 4 league games without a win. They host bottom side Hamilton. Rangers are away to Hibs. Rangers go into the game 23 points clear at the top. Former Aston Villa and Celtic manager Dr. Josef Englas has died at the age of 84. He moved to Villa Park in 1990. He was also in charge of Celtic in 1998. Managed Czechoslovakia, the first manager to lead Slovakia when they regained independence. And the word from the GAA, it's something you're going to talk about on the back of the papers, that looks like they're going to meet next week to discuss what the fallout is from the restrictions staying in place until March. But I think it's fair to say the league is probably going to be pushed back a couple of weeks at this stage.
Yeah, that's the expectation from all the GAA writers in the papers as well. Phil, good stuff. Thanks very much for that. Here's what's coming up on the show between now and 10 a.m. for you. We're going to be speaking with Christian Falk in just a moment to tell you about what's happening with Thomas Tuchel. We have Diarmuid Lyng joining us at 8:15. John's going to join us at 8:35 for another Virtual Insanity. We'll talk a bit about Rory McIlroy and plenty more coming your way after that in the second hour. Talking Kerry GAA, going down to Australia to talk to Orla O'Dwyer about life in the Women's Australian Football League. And Niall Moyna is going to talk to us around about 9:30 this morning. We'll play out his piece from last night too. Now, I'm delighted to say Christian Falk is with us. We'll get to Christian just one moment. This is a guest who's been talking about Thomas Tuchel and the possibilities of him ending up at Chelsea for a good while now. So by this stage, I think most of you will have a picture of what happened with Tuchel in France. But we want to go back a little bit and find out a bit more about his earlier career and what Chelsea fans can expect in terms of style of play, and that notion that he's from the gegenpressing school of management. What exactly will that mean for those Chelsea players, and how is he going to get on with Havertz, Werner, Rudiger, and Thiago Silva? I mean, obviously we had that yesterday, that the expectation was that he gets on very well with him, so we will see. If you've got a comment for us this morning, we'd love to hear from you. 087 9 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. Of course, you can always email am@offtheball.com if you've got something more considered. We'd loads of comments coming in about the rugby depth charts that we've been doing. We'll talk about them a little bit later on, and we will also talk about the situation with regards to the future of sport in Ireland. We're having a very broad-ranging conversation about trying to keep more people active and participating in sport in the country at the moment. It's a very important time for us to be able to do that, and a good opportunity for us to revisit some first principles. But let's get back to the football, and as I said, I'm delighted to say Christian Falk is with us. Christian, good morning to you.
Hey, good morning to Alan.
You have predicted that Thomas Tuchel would end up at Chelsea for quite a while now. Why did you think that he was the perfect fit for them, or what was your instinct behind that?
So I already knew there were contacts just before Lampard, and the club was always interesting for him. It has the perfect profile, young players, high quality. So I thought there's just one other club which would have been interesting for him. I know it would have been interesting for him. That would be Barcelona. And he's very close. There's a connection to Laporta, which is one of the presidents on the election. But the election was changed from January to March, so they were out. And so I thought that will happen very, very soon, because they need a coach like him. And I think he's the right one.
So he obviously believes he's the right man for the job. It is a job that doesn't have a very long shelf life. Is that in any way a concern for managers?
No, you have to see that the profile of Tuchel is also very, very interesting for Chelsea, because he worked at Dortmund and had problems with the sporting director. He was working for PSG, where he had problems with Leonardo, also head of sport. And he always liked to take our club in England, where the coach, as we call him in Germany, is a manager. So he has no sporting director like the other ones, where he has to fight some transfers or decisions about the squad. It's like he's meeting now Thiago Silva again. Thiago Silva was one part of the clash with Leonardo, because Leonardo didn't give him a new contract. Now he went to Chelsea, and now he has him back again. So you see the many arguments, because Chelsea was his choice.
That's really interesting. So that in a sense the relationship is actually really good, because it was an immediate, the relationship isn't going to be good. But it turns out Tuchel already knows a good few players in this squad and certainly knows their profile very well.
Yes. You know, you have the German players. He tried to get Rüdiger to PSG, also a clash with Leonardo because he didn't pay the fee for the loan. And I think the big difference is at PSG, it was very interesting for him to work with Neymar and Mbappé. And I think he showed that he can work with superstars. But he prefers not such difficult characters like the clashing with Cavani and Neymar. He prefers a club like Chelsea, where you have a lot of quality and a lot of talents, and he can make them to superstars. I think this is his way. He wants education, and this he finds at Chelsea.
What will his style of play be? Should we expect his team to play more like the Dortmund team that he was head coach of rather than the PSG team that he was head coach of, or will it be a mix?
He has quite a kind of style, but he's not like Pep Guardiola. They're very close, they're friends, but Pep Guardiola is always on the same system. I think Tuchel can change his system. He has not one, but he's a little bit like Pep Guardiola and he's a little bit like Klopp. I think he's in the middle, and I think this is a good way for Chelsea because he can play ball possession, but he can also play a very, very quick style. And he has to play that because he has a player for that, like Werner, who is very fast, and some others in the team. So I think this is a very good point. I think that's why he chose also Chelsea, because he searched a club which fits to him, but he's not on one system.
So he basically sees a team without a philosophy and sees that as a positive.
Yes, so that's the point. I think Lampard is an icon at Chelsea, but he has had no such experience. I heard from the team that they missed that they gave him the tactic. Lampard was just saying, you have to fight, you have to do the basics. But this team of Chelsea, there are many young players, and they like to have a plan. And I think Tuchel is a manager with a clear plan. He's really good in this. So I think this is the way they do. And he sees where the players can do the position, and he can change a little bit players. You see, I was very impressed by Neymar at the Champions League tournament in Lisbon when he was playing as a team player the first time I saw him. So I think this is what Tuchel likes, and that's why he was because normally he would have preferred to take over a team in summer where he has time to make his training, to go in a camp, but that he did it now, that shows that he was very, very keen on Chelsea.
You make it sound, Christian, like he is a bit of a genius.
Is Pep Guardiola a genius? Is Klopp a genius?
Yes, I would say yes to both of them. And if he's on that level, it's like, wow, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, they're all strange guys. When you meet Tuchel, he's a complicated guy. But I met also Klopp and I met also Guardiola. They are all in a kind of way complicated. These fights Tuchel had with the manager of Dortmund and sporting director of PSG is because he's 100% football. He don't make a compromise. He just goes his way, and this is I think always a part of genius, that you're not easy.
So is that maybe a watch out or a potential for this not to work perfectly, that it will take Tuchel a little bit of time to get his character in across to the entire club, and not just the playing staff but also the hierarchy?
I don't think so, because Abramovich chose him also, and Marina is the Iron Lady is very, very strict in her decisions, but I don't think he's. There were, Leonardo was going in the dressing room and he tried to influence the starting 11. I think that would never happen at Chelsea, and this is the point. I don't think that Tuchel don't talk with the board about things. At PSG he didn't get the transfers he liked for the whole time he was there. So. But I think if he can do his job on the pitch and get quite the players he like, he's not saying you have to buy Mbappé for me. He's very happy to get young players for his system, and he has it there. Harvard's big promise. He knows him from Germany. He didn't work at the Lampard system, and I think he liked the development of the team. And so I don't think there will be such clashes like in the past. And that's also a part of Chelsea, that there is nobody who says you have to play like this. But he has to play with the stuff he has. But he likes it.
Christian, have you been surprised by the underperformances so far from Timo Werner and Kai Havertz?
Many colleagues from Premier League called me before, and I said that this is a high price which Chelsea paid for Havertz especially, and they don't have to forget that he's not a complete player now. That where Bayern Munich didn't bought him because it was a huge amount of money, but I said don't forget that he's a big promise. So don't think that he costs 80 or 100 million euros and he will work immediately. You have to wait a little bit, and this is of course not so easy if a player is so expensive. But you have to play him, let him play on his position, and I think this was the problem with Lampard and the team. I also know that Timo Werner spoke to Lampard and said, "Oh, coach, I'm playing on the left side. That's not my position. I need the deepness of the pitch to go on my speed, and I like to play in the middle." We talked before that I am a 9.5. When he played in the middle, Lampard put him on the 11. It's also not his position. If such young players are coming to a team which is not complete already, so the team has also to develop, you have to give them the positions and the structure. And this was missing, but I think Tuchel knows that. He saw it, and he knows the players very, very well. Not only the German one, of course, but when you talk about Werner or you talk about Havertz, you see that this was a big problem for these young players.
So how do you expect him to fix that problem? Is there a specific formation or a certain style of play that you've seen from Tuchel's career so far that would suggest that he can get Werner and Havertz on the pitch together in a starting team and for it to be a success for Chelsea?
Yes, I think he has to find his. I think he has something in his head already. But you have very, very good players which are quite on the same position, like Mason Mount, and it's how you can play with Havertz and Mason Mount. It's like Günter Netzer and Overath in the 70s in Germany. So if you have such great players, you have to find a way that they work together. But I'm sure that Tuchel find something, because this is the thing he loves. He's thinking 24 hours a day and 7 days a week about football. And I think it will work, but it's not like that he's coming there and said, I just play like that, and these are my starting 11. He will take a look at it, and he don't need new players. He's not coming there and say, I need this one and this one. He wants to work with this squad. And so I think he's very confident what he saw.
Do you think there will be any transfers in this window for Chelsea, or it will be summer before we see anything?
I think it will be summer. I heard that Tuchel doesn't say something about the transfers. He's fine with the squad. He knows that we'll have some decisions in the future. Everybody knows that in the defense there are some problems. The goalkeeper now is new, but he's not, he's not Manuel Neuer. So you have to watch, but he's not coming there and has a completely meaning about everything. Everybody has a chance, and we can show that he's good enough for Chelsea, and then I think the decisions are in summer.
How ruthless can he be, Christian? Because just thinking about it, I know we've asked you a couple of questions about the two Germans, but does there not have to be a sense of parking that if you're Thomas Tuchel coming into the club? And as you say there, if Mason Mount is ahead of Kai Havertz in the team and it's a 1-to-1, he will pick the better player. He won't be loyal necessarily to the German players in the squad. He will be loyal to whoever the best player is in that position. Do you think he will have the ruthlessness to do what is necessary if it's required?
You can ask Julian Draxler at PSG. I think, he would say no. So no, there is no German bonus, and he will pick the best. And he's, football is not a game of countries. It's international, and the best will play. And Kehrer, Draxler, or Choupo-Moting, I don't think they had any advantage at PSG.
Will he be loyal to the transfer fee? That's the other thing that managers feel a burden to somehow re-establish or protect the value that the club has invested.
Yeah, I think this is a big point. That was, I think, a little bit the difficulties with Lampard, who said, I need a rise and pay a lot of money for him. That's not Tuchel. I think when you saw the time at Paris, of course there were clashes between Leonardo and him because of transfers. But he never said, please buy this player for me or this player for me. He said always just the squad is not good enough to win the Champions League. There's not the quality. He saw there is a Mbappé, there is a Neymar. This is the best you can have. But behind the squad was getting not better the years he were. He lost a lot of good players and didn't get better ones,
Yeah.
And at Chelsea, I think, this is a club now. The quality is so high, perhaps on one or two positions. They have to do something. That's why we are talking about Upamecano at the moment. Or I don't know how he will decide on the goalkeeper position. That's getting very interesting. But at the end, he will be loyal what the club did before in the transfer market. And if he has one or two wishes in summer, I think this is normal for this job.
Is there a quick fix in David Alaba floating around? Because there's every fan base in England at the moment wants Alaba to sign for them. What's available and what is not currently at your team is always the best player in the world at a position of need. Is there any chance that Alaba moves in this window, do you think?
He will move in summer.
Right.
He will move in summer and he will take his time. I know that his big dream is Real Madrid. And I'm sorry for that, not the Premier League. Now it's a little bit talking about money. They have clear idea in their head what they want to earn. And also, he has an agent. Pete Zahavi also knows what he wants to earn. And it was a little bit like Tuchel when they're looking also to Barcelona because it's another club he prefers. But it's the same like Tuchel. When, the elections in March, I don't know if they can wait so long. And I heard that they have good talks with Real Madrid. I think it will be Real Madrid at the end. But, when you hear City is paying 3 million more and Chelsea's interest, I don't think it will be Chelsea at the end. I think it will be Real Madrid, but you never know what happens when there's an amount of money in the market. It's nothing signed yet, but I think there's a quite of handshake to Real. So at the end, I think it will be Real, but it will be a club in summer, not now.
One last question for you. Mesut Ozil, obviously, his era is finished. Odegaard is joining Arsenal. What did you make of Ozil in England and his time? Will that come to be seen as a success eventually? Will people forget about how it finished? Or is that one of the great unfulfilled moments in German football?
Yeah, it's a pity. We have to say this. It's such a great player. I don't know if the Premier League was the right move for him. We know that it happened because his father was his agent at this time and he had some strugglings with Real Madrid. If Real Madrid and Ronaldo was there saying, I miss Mesut Özil, that he must be a very, very good player. I think that Arsenal and Özil fits also good together about the system, how he could play there. But at the end, it was, I think, too much money in this game. And then if you have such a player, you have to let him play. He's a very, how you call it in English, he has his very strict way. There were also problems in the national team. It's hard. When you go the way with Özil, you have to goes 100%, and Arsenal at the end didn't like to do that. I can understand in parts. I can understand also Özil, who is disappointed at the end. He would have played till the end if he had the chance. So I think it's hard for his career because I think he could do many great things and win a few titles more. So at the end, he earned a lot of money. So we don't have to have to think, oh, poor Mesut. But I think for the football, it's a pity.
Christian, great to have you with us. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Christian Falk there giving us some time and insight into the situation with Thomas Tuchel. Loads of comments coming through on this one. Shane says, Tuchel sounds like a great guy, except he's going into a club that are cutthroat. Philosophy aside for Tuchel, he's in the lion's den now. That's interesting, though, the way that Christian Falk was saying it. It's like it was his choice. So his reputation as a football manager not in any way diminished by what happened at Paris Saint-Germain, and not in any way diminished by the falling out that he had at Borussia Dortmund either.
And also, what I found very interesting there is that he's got his sights set on a bigger job down the line. He wants to manage Barcelona, clearly. And he is well entitled to go into the Lion's Den knowing that the Lion is going to gobble him up at some point in the near future. He'll probably do his 2 years, get sacked with a little bit of credit in the bank, and then maybe become Barcelona manager. That is a win-win for Thomas Tuchel.
Do you not think that he automatically turns them into title contenders next season?
Well, he has to. That absolutely has to be what happens next season. Like, Lampard needed to do that this season with the money he had spent, and if he fails to do that, we will be sitting here next season and Tuchel will not be the manager of Chelsea. He needs to put in a title challenge before Christmas, or else he is going to be sacked, because that squad is way too talented for them to be anywhere lower than a title challenger. And
I expect a manager with his track record to be able to do that.
So do I, absolutely. And the most encouraging thing, and I know you covered this more in yesterday's show, that the most encouraging thing almost is the way he managed to get the best out of Neymar last season, or almost bring him back in from the cold a little bit, or back into form, and kind of play to his ego a little bit more than maybe other managers have done in the past. He knows how to curate a superstar, basically, and get the very best out of him. And he's got a lot of superstars in his team.
Well, he doesn't, though, yet. He has a lot of players who should be, or capable of being superstars, or who are paid like superstars, but who haven't actually hit the stratospheric levels. Like, Pulisic, not world class just yet, but could be. Kai Havertz, definitely not world class at the moment. Not getting anywhere near a World 11 team. But, you know, in 18 months, maybe Timo Werner can be. Maybe Mason Mount can be. Like, there's a lot of maybes around those players. So I think it'll be very interesting to see. They're suddenly a very interesting club again. Like, with Frank Lampard, it was kind of, that's an interesting experiment. That's not really working out very well. Oof. What's going on there? Whereas with Tuchel, you imagine that there will be a very set plan. And the one thing as well is coming in now, right? One of the papers had it, he's expected to make them challenge for a title immediately. That's not going to happen. But what we have seen is, so Brendan Rodgers had that coming in the middle of the season, and things were grand, tricky, and then he actually had a full off-season, and then had that full first season to get them to the point now where it looks like they could be title challengers. Like Chelsea, you've got to accelerate that process a lot quicker. And even Liverpool, under Klopp, took a while to get to the point where they weren't losing random games midweek or weekends against inferior teams. So I hope he's given 18 months to build a team.
Yeah. So do I, because he's an infinitely interesting guy. But Chelsea now almost seems like when you're playing Football Manager and about 2 seasons into the game, things just start to get really weird. Like if you were playing Football Manager from 10 years ago, you're like, hold on a minute, Alex Ferguson is manager of Arsenal now. Thiago Silva plays for this team. Where did they get this guy from? And the AI just does strange things where you're like, this would never happen in real life. If you were playing Football Manager 2018 and you saw this happen to Chelsea, you'd be like, Football Manager has gone crazy. The AI has absolutely lost the plot here. You're right. It's so exciting. It is so novel. And to be honest with you, I really enjoyed watching Chelsea under Lampard because they were always one game away from a little bit of a crisis. And they've just got so much star power in that team that you can't but love watching them play.
10 minutes past 9 this morning. One last comment on this. How ironic that Frank lost the dressing room when he as a player was part of a tough playing group that basically played or didn't play relative to each manager they liked. Ruhamore and Thiel, I believe. 10 minutes past 8 this morning here on Wednesday, the 27th of January. We've got plenty happening across the next hour. We're going to go to Australia to chat to Tipperary and Brisbane Lions star Orla O'Dwyer. We'll talk West Ham and golf with John Duggan, and Diarmuid Lyng joins us next. Back after these.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station. Off the ball.
Jamie caught Frank with quite a bad challenge, and the physio's patching him up, and Les Seeley, his turned to Frank. He went, Frank, get back on and do him good and proper. He said he took a liberty there. He said, make sure you leave it on him good and proper. And I'm stood there, I'm thinking, oh, hang on. He's talking about him doing this ain't right, you know.
Off the ball. Weeknights from 7 and weekends from 1.
This is OTB Sports Radio, live 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
Check out the Boyle Sports app today for details on which football match is getting the no-lose treatment this week. Plus, study the form with our Racing Post Spotlight before watching the action with free live streaming on all UK and Irish horse races. See the Boyle Sports app for full T's and C's. Boyle Sports. This is betting. Gamble responsibly. See gamblingcare.ie 18+.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
10 minutes past 8. Let's run you through the newspapers this morning. We can start with OTBSports.com. The home test that shows how fit you are for your age. It's basically balance and push-ups. What can you do? That's Niall Moyna talking last night. Abramovich and Lukaku getting into it on the field in the Milan derby last night. Christian Eriksen with a 98th minute winner. Might be his last act for Inter Milan. Thomas Tuchel confirmed, obviously. Joey Carberry, pictures of him at training yesterday for Munster to gladden the hearts of Munster and Ireland fans. And Sterling racks up another ton, but Ireland whitewashed by Afghanistan, which is not good timing for the Irish cricket team. It's all about qualifiers for World Cups, etc. And they could have done with some wins there. Very quickly to the newspapers. Front of the Irish Times. Now, right off the bat, O'Connell must deliver a functioning Irish line-out. This is Gordon Darcy's column saying that he hasn't been brought in for his rousing speeches, but rather his technical ability. The Irish Independent. Connellan slams lazy arguments on Dubs funding. So this is the Westmeath star, former Westmeath star, as he's referred to here, John Connellan, flabbergasted at the lazy arguments being put forward by the Leinster GAA chairman, Pat Tehan. There should be alarm bells and red flags going off in Leinster offices in Portlaoise, and for the chairman to come out and say, no, in fact, this is good for association is surprising, to say the least. We can all see the Leinster Championship is dead and buried. It's speaking to Michael Verney in the piece there, and they also have a picture of Zlatan headbutting Romelu Lukaku. All sorts of allegations and speculation about what they said to each other, which we all know you'll get sued for if you get them wrong, because that's what happened with Materazzi and Zidane when Zidane headbutted Materazzi. Materazzi sued all the newspapers who incorrectly, allegedly, reported what it was that was supposed to have been said in the first place. So you've got to be very careful about what you think Zlatan said to Romelu and what Romelu said to Zlatan. But apparently they were giving it the big one on both sides. Tommy Super. Tuchel takes over at Chelsea and says it feels amazing, but he's warned that he must deliver top 4 spot. And then obviously Paul O'Hare's been speaking with Jack Byrne, who says that he wasn't worried when Apoel Ultras smashed up cars at the training ground. Like, I've come to the right place. This is making me feel good. So yeah, obviously Mick McCarthy was sacked. There's nothing I could do. The ink was dry. I have huge respect for Mick because he handed me my Ireland debut, and I can't speak highly enough of him. But obviously it's all worked out for Mick. He's got a new gig pretty quickly with Cardiff, and the back of the Star. Sorry, Frank's $1 million. That's Thomas Tuchel on his way out, giving Frank Lampard an attaboy. Stephen Kenny be a hero. That's Jack Byrne saying this. Stephen Kenny can be a good manager for Ireland. And then this headline I don't get at all.
You will see.
What?
Tuchel see, you will see.
Tuchel see?
I thought it earlier and it took me 4 seconds to figure it out.
That doesn't make any sense. You will see.
Oh, sorry, no. Tuchel see, you shall see. Sorry. You shall see, Tuchel see.
What's you shall see?
I guess, is the quote, is the subheadline saying something about Tuchel saying, you shall see how good a manager I'm going to be?
Tom, I can't wait to get on Tuchel.
Oh, wait, I've got that completely wrong. I've got that completely arseways. I'm just after seeing it here that it's SEA rather than SWE.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's obviously they've decided that people are too thick, and obviously, it's Chelsea.
Chelsea.
But it's not. It's Tuchel. So what's happening is the Sun are mispronouncing the new German manager's name, because it's German and there's going to be some jokes. I'm surprised there isn't a Fritz or a Bomber or any of those kind of references in the papers this morning. But anyway, the Irish Daily Mail.
It wasn't low-hanging enough fruit for me.
It was Chelsea. That's what they're doing. They're mispronouncing his name because they obviously can't pronounce it because they're out of Europe now, Eoin, so therefore it's not possible that they might be able to understand any of the other languages that are spoken around there. Anyway, on the double, competitions can run side by side. That's Turlough O'Brien, the former Cardiff football manager, saying that the league and the championship should run at the same time. And the London Times, the crack with this is Tuchel to dive straight in. So a point that we meant to ask Christian Falk was he's going to be in the Stamford Bridge dugout when they face Wolves this evening. I'm not sure what the crack is about his quarantining. This is a point that Emma raised. Perhaps he was in England for the last fortnight, just waiting for, self-isolating happily, already there. Maybe he knew something was going to happen. He felt it in his bones. That's how this works in football. Frank Lampard wasn't quite sacked. Results could go either way. But just in case, you just want to be on the doorstep of the... more than likely there was a job coming up there at some point. I'm not suggesting there was anything else going on at all, but it's just an interesting... Or maybe you don't have to quarantine. Maybe he's got a vaccine. Who knows? 16 minutes past 8 last night. No. What are you laughing at, Eoin?
It's 16 minutes past 8 this morning.
It is.
I thought.
Yeah. What do you think about the Thomas Tuchel situation?
It's like I don't know what his travel plans were. I don't know how long he's been in the country for. To be honest with you, I don't know what the travel rules are to and from the UK at the moment. So I'm sure everything's being done above board, and he'll be there, sitting there on the dugout tonight. That's what's going to happen, isn't it? It's dugout for Tuchel tonight rather than assessing the situation from the third tier. Maybe it's because you can't actually have spectators in the ground, so for him to actually get into the stadium, he would actually need to be in the dugout rather than in the stands. Maybe it's something like that. But the camera will pan to him many a time this evening, and like all of a sudden, I know it's a 6 o'clock game, but it's the match you want to watch tonight. You want to see this, and you want to see if there's any early fingerprints from him over the squad.
The Examiner, Holland says a lot of Munster players under strain amid crazy contract stuff. So Billy Holland gave a really interesting press conference yesterday where he was talking about the stress and strains that some of the Munster players he's currently playing with are feeling because of the contract situation. Obviously, no contracts were discussed until the start of this year, when generally they would have been wrapped up by now for next season. So he was saying that it's different for him. He's 35 and towards the end of his career and hasn't made a decision about playing on or what his future is going to be. But for younger lads, there's no point in me saying to a 25-year-old, you'll be grand, because that may not be true. I know that Munster want to keep the squad we have, but financially it might be a different situation. It's just tough on guys. It really is. And so these players are all going out and risking getting injured. You do a bad shoulder, you do a bad knee or a bad ankle, and we're at the start of February, essentially. You could be out for 6 months, but you're not getting paid when your contract runs out in the summer. And I can understand why there would be a little bit of reticence there. It's a risky business, professional rugby, and it is fairly cutthroat as well. So I wonder, will that feed into how players feel heading into next season as well? So what is it? 18 minutes past 8 here this morning. If you want to get in touch with us on WhatsApp, 087 9 180 180. We've been talking about the future of sport all week. And I think we're going to continue talking about this now for the next few months until we get some consensus about it. All inspired by what's going on in New Zealand, where they're trying to restore the notion that fun is the main part about participating in sport, and that if we lose that and if we continue to adopt the win-at-all-cost mentality, then people are going to continue to drop out. And what's the point if everybody drops out? So to that end, I'm delighted to say we've got Diarmuid Lyng with us for a general catch-up. Before we get into all that stuff, Diarmuid, congratulations on your high-profile transfer move. You were making waves. You're hurling in Kerry now.
The big winter move, Ger. Yeah. It's hard to know how to even approach it. It's not. It's obviously there's a global shutdown in sport, and so any story maybe will do. I want to play. I definitely just want to play again, and it doesn't look like I can get too far up the road anymore. So if I can get into Tralee to play, I'll certainly take that. But it doesn't, like, there's kind of one life, one club. Like, you feel these things in the GA, like these maxims, and you feel like it's something that you stay kind of loyal to or true to or whatever. And then there's just sometimes you have to move because the game, you just want to play the game,
I was driving the other day and had Radio Carry On, and you were third story on the sports news, Diarmuid.
I mean, yeah. The lads seem the Parnells really seem to be kind of. I don't know, like down in Kerry, the landscape is so different in terms of hurling and what we've been used to. So it's really just, I don't know. I don't know. It's not anything. It's not necessarily a big thing for me. Like when I think about hurling, I think about St Martin's. I think about Wexford. That's the area that when I feel the game, like that's what I feel. And nothing has happened yet. I haven't been to a train station. I haven't been to a game. I don't know any of the lads. So it hasn't been a thing yet for me. So hopefully I can get in and play some games. I had a daughter 2 weeks ago. So that's going to put manners on me and my ability to head off for 3 or 4 hours into Tralee to play a game of hurling. But I'm looking forward to it.
You obviously wanted to play. I think this is it's actually at the centre of all of the stuff that we want to talk about, really, is like that desire to just play and have fun and commune, as opposed to, and look, maybe you want to compete, maybe you want to, you want to play as well as you can do. You were like a natural competitor anyway, but you're not going there to win a Kerry championship necessarily, but just to actually enjoy the weight of the ball in your hand again. Yeah,
that's about the size of it. I mean, I think with all of this conversation, Jordan, and we've talked about this a few times before, there is a role as I feel it and as I see it. There's a role for competition in this conversation about the future of sport. I mean, there has to be, because it seems to be something that's quite instinctive to a certain amount of us, maybe not to everybody. And there has to be the conditions. I think will always exist where people with a natural sense of competition will gravitate towards a team sport where there's a little bit of chaos and the aim of the game is to win. I mean, and I think that's fine. Where it becomes problematic and where it has become increasingly problematic in Ireland is around, I mean, globally, whatever, in just focus on Ireland, and maybe the games that we know here, like in the GA, you would say that it gets, when it gets locked up with, when that need to win gets locked up and locked in around identity, it becomes very problematic for fellas. And then we begin to see, the narrative of having to hate the fella up the road who's playing the same game, and that's what defines our area, is our hatred of these people up the road, or I suppose whatever the different trappings of the win at all cost philosophy that drive people out of their natural rhythm. I mean, that's really kind of that's what we're trying to resolve a little bit. The fun side of it, I think, comes in a little bit more naturally then, because it's interesting. I created a game. The GA are addressing this, and I think around the world, the problem facing sporting organisations is dropout, and so the organisations essentially have to resolve this problem, and then we in the media have to have conversations about it. But I suppose I feel like the responsibility, the little bit of an anarchist in me, feels like we have to sort this problem out in ourselves first, and what we consider play to be and what we consider the commons to be. And it seems to me anyway that there is less and less places we can go socially because of insurance and because of land ownership where we can actually just play. And so it becomes this very defined, well, the GA club is a place, or the soccer field is a place, or the rugby field is a place where you can play. And I would totally reject that, and hope going forward that we reject that, because I think we should be able to play anywhere. I think there should be games of hurling on the beach. I think it should be in farmers' fields. I think we can shut off traffic on a road in the middle of a town and play a game of hurling. I think that these things can be possible when we have shifts in ourselves enough to realise that actually play is probably more fundamental to us than doing business is. And that's where, I think that's where they're more, maybe they're wilder ideas, but sure, of course, that's what I'd probably arrive at.
Yeah, well, beach hurling sounds like we should be trying to get it in the Olympics, except not competitive.
We started doing it in the summer, and one of the things, so this is where the nuts and bolts of it then shift, because when the aim of your game is to play to win, then in the tackle you play to win, and you tackle to win, and it's not about the other person who you're tackling, it's about you, and it's about you getting the ball to get it to somebody else in your team to score. When you play a little bit more, when you play allowing for your community, when you play allowing for women playing with you, when you play allowing for children playing with you, when you play with people who have never played the game before, and you try and allow for those people to play the game with you, and yet still not get the same enjoyment out of it. What I have found is that if you tackle, for example, if I come to somebody in a tackle and I know that they've been playing for 6 months and I'm playing for all of my life, the responsibility falls to me in the tackle to tackle with that knowledge, with that deeper and greater awareness, because that's what I have. And it's with me that responsibility is. And my responsibility is to the person that I'm tackling. And what I'm saying to them is, I'm not giving you a free ride because you're not going to learn anything by that. But I am going to give you enough space that you learn and you grow. And all of that's happening in a split second, but that's the responsibility that you have as the better player. And when everybody takes that attitude, or when that attitude is adopted as kind of one of the rules of the game, replacing a win at all costs mentality in the game, you can see the improvements that people make. You see the joy that they experience in making the improvements. And it's just, I couldn't even begin to explain to like people down here in West Kerry who've never held a hurl before, after an hour on the beach of playing, and the sense of satisfaction and the sense of joy and the sense of gratitude that they have, not only to you for organising it, but to everybody else around them for taking part in it, it's spectacular, you know. So that's why I'm the organisation have a responsibility, and they're tackling it very, very well. And I just heard last week we were on with Colin Regan, Colin Kills, a few of the clubs that were on were talking about the social games and the benefit that it has been, particularly in the lockdown. And it's phenomenal. It really is phenomenal. One of the things that came up was really interesting was around the coaches who were our parents themselves, and they went back in to play this social game. And when the game was starting, like, they kind of organised a match against another social team, and I guess less high stakes than the normal games that are there. But everybody in the dressing room got nervous before, like the jerseys were laid out, and it was kind of done a little bit seriously. And our man, the coach, the guy who was guiding the team, wanted them to feel this, and they came in, they saw it, and they got a little bit of butterflies, and they were like, well, Ginny, I don't know, do I want to play in this anymore? And he was saying, right, that feeling there, that's nervousness. That's what 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 14-year-olds, that's what they feel before every game, before training sessions. They feel a little bit of nervousness coming into a dressing room with a load of, with 20 other people to have to go out and play a game. And as a coach, you're 10 times better to know your own nervousness, to get a sense of what theirs is, to be able to interact with them. So small things like that, I think, open doors in how we empathize with our young people and the people around us in order to play in a particular way that I think is a little bit more sustainable than drive it as hard as you can for as long as you can, as fast as you can. I don't think that's going to end well. Yeah,
it burns out people's love of the sport if it's always, like we got sold the whole self-improvement thing as a shtick from the 80s that exploded into a multi-billion dollar industry, and everybody wants to get better, but is getting better actually like crushing your opponent every single time? Probably isn't. Ultimately, it probably isn't, because we all have to live together. Increasingly more of us on increasingly less resources. Is there a way that we can use sport to be an accommodating thing that keeps 15, 17, 19-year-olds active?
Well, it's a tough one. It's a tough one, because I think it's mirrored, as generally is the case in sport. It's mirrored in greater society at the moment, and you have the people who feel that competition is essential, and win at all cost philosophy is a natural aspect of the human condition, and the game must continue as it is. And anybody who says anything to the contrary has been overly feminized, or has been too impacted by their mothers, or is looking for a softer approach to life, or something like that. And so the transition, as we kind of transition more over time into a game that is less maybe less cutthroat, or maybe has less negative connotations when it comes to place and things like that. Maybe there will be a little bit of something will come to the surface in that, like we see that socially. People think, oh, well, the polarization of society or racism, things like these things are, they come to the surface when somebody like Donald Trump comes to the presidency. But I think just when certain conditions come up, when certain topics of debate come up that everybody has to have, then those things come to the surface automatically, I think. And we will see people who feel that is a softening of the game. But from my experience, and this I think is probably the only thing or one of the few things that has real value, I feel here, is because going to the top of the game in the way that we are encouraged to go to the top of the game, and the experience at the top of the game, well, I wasn't at the top, but I'm up around there somewhere, and looking around me at the fellas who are with me and playing against me, certainly the most prescient thing amongst that whole experience that I can say is that there was a lack of joy. Now, that's not to say there wasn't joy. There certainly was joy, and people who won, lost, did brilliant things, did amazing things, had injuries, experienced different kinds of joys all along the way. There's no doubt about that, and there's no point in, thinking that I'm saying something severe there. Of course there's joy, but could there be, is it possible that it wouldn't carry the tension, it wouldn't be weighing fellas down, it wouldn't be creating a kind of this notion of sacrifice, that we have to sacrifice to do this. Like, hang on there now, like, can we just roll this back a little bit? Stop training fellas 6 nights a week, clubs roll back, give lads a chance. And we talked about these things 3 or 4 years ago, Ger, and one of the things that always came up was, you can't change it. It's going forward. It's only going forward. It's only going more precise. And then coronavirus comes along, and you can change it. You can. It can be changed. So I think as we begin to reimagine what our engagement with sport is like, which is what we have to do now, and it's all cards on the table. Like, whoever wants to put forward the best ideas and the most sustainable ideas and the most reasonable ideas, that people will run with them. So I think definitely that way was gone too extreme. For clubs and for county teams, that way was gone too extreme. And the feedback went back in through the GPA, the feedback came back from the players at inter-county level. And maybe the club is only going to get there in time anyway, where they say, look, our freedoms can't be curtailed so much. The notion of not having a weekend off for 9 months, like fellas who are working, okay, they choose to do it, but do they need to? They'll choose to do it because they want to play, and they'll accept certain things because they want to play, because they have a real burning ambition to play. But do we need to take advantage of that? Do we need to hang their athletic identity over their heads and say, you can't play if you don't train all the time, and tell me where you are all the time, and wear all the same gear all the time, and sign this contract, and do this, and go here, and don't do this? I mean, what are we doing? Like, to have a man say to another man, you can't go here. Like, I like that in the professional sports. They say, you can run 100 meters in 10 seconds on Saturday, and you can run 100 meters in 10 seconds the following Saturday. It's not really my business what you do in between. Now, here's a list of things you probably should be doing, but that's the responsibility, your output, and how you are. So we've a huge opportunity to reimagine it, and I'm glad that this conversation has taken place at the likes of Pat on this week and plenty more besides, to have those conversations. So I was thinking about it last night, Ger. I mean, sometimes I feel my timing off the ball, like I think about the overall experience of it, or I think about individual experience of it, and at times it was a bit of a struggle. But there's one day I remember very, very clearly in what I would consider, in a way, my work off the ball, because which with you was heading off up to the park, the two of us, in the gear, and moving back and forth, and moving side to side, and catching and blocking and missing and doing everything else, but playing hurling together is like a standout memory I have. Like, I can see the colours you're wearing, I can feel the movements in my body. Like, that's a standout moment. Now, we could have gone and had a coffee, and I don't think I'd really remember that. I mean, you're an interesting manager, but I just don't think I just don't think I'd remember it, because I was probably, I'd be going meeting people. That's a thing you do, you go meet people for a coffee, but it's quite unmemorable. But when you feel it in your body, and there's 2 people playing back and forth, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and whatever it is, a WhatsApp group gets together and just plays wherever they want to. I mean, I feel it's I feel it's possible, it's feasible, and it's valuable.
That's remarkable. Like, I guess that's something that a lot of people would probably attach to their childhood as well, Diarmuid. That idea, if you had to pick out specific moments, you'd almost pick out the games you played as a kid easier than any other moments.
Yeah, I have. I mean, maybe Billy Rackard might have brought it back to me in with the title of his book, No Hurling at the Dairy Door. But I have one of my most distinct childhood memories is being at the Dairy Door in my mother's sister's place in Thomastown, Helen Farrell, whose sisters, whose daughters, Megan, Anna, and Shelley all play for the Kenny Camogie team, and Donjo played for the hurling team, and we would go up to their house, and I can remember being outside that door playing hurling for hours and hours, what seemed like hours and hours on end. Maybe it was only for an hour, but it doesn't matter. That, you know, that kind of memory. And I think maybe that's something that we do, Owen, is it, you know, like a lament for our childhood or something like that, like for those simpler times. But those experiences, I think those experiences can be created and recreated anew as 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds as well. That if we can just move into that sense of playfulness out of the serious work of who we are in the high street, of who we are in our jobs, of who we are in our relationships, and move into very sincerely and very genuinely, like just a timeless play. And that is what play, like that is what the big invite of play is, the opportunity to experience a flow state where you move out of your social mind, your worrying, your concerned, your whatever mind it is that you have into flow. Like that's the invite of sport, and not sport but play. And so we're afraid of that. I think, to be honest, we're afraid of that flow state in a way. So we set the thing up in a way that has structures and systems and thinking, because the human condition is such that we just seem to be most afraid of that flow timelessness that is possible for us. So that's going maybe way out there, but
no, I think that's the whole point. I think that's because what we're saying is by forcing kids to drop out because we insist on only picking the best and forgetting the rest, is that we deny them the opportunity in their teenage years, the joy of going hurling. I remember that too. I've had a million coffees that I don't remember, but I absolutely remember that, and I lament the fact that I haven't done it with anybody since, and stupidly I haven't accessed that, right? But it's like it's precisely the removal of that from people in their 20s and 30s and the rest of their lives. We're saying, no, you can't have access to that, you can't do that, don't do that, because you weren't good enough in the first place. That's stupid. It's a really stupid thing for society to do. And I had a snowball fight with my kids at the weekend, and it was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. And they were shocked. They were absolutely shocked. And I was like, why are they so shocked? Do I not do this stuff with them enough? But clearly I don't. But there was that sense of like this being random and anarchic and who knows what's going to happen. And I don't know. I think that like the pure focus on elitism and the investment that we make in elite sport is the wrong way around. We should have a pure focus on investment in grassroots. And if elite stuff bubbles up from it, then support them on the way. But it's the fact that everybody's playing that's the glory of this, not the fact that some people can play brilliantly at the very top. They're great, and that's brilliant. And I'm delighted that you had that access to an elite career, and you were elite. But that doesn't define you. Ultimately now, it certainly doesn't at this stage. It probably did when you were at that age, but wouldn't it be much better if 15,000 people of your age group had access to the same kind of whatever it was that brought you up? You would have bubbled up anyway, even if there had been loads more people doing it around you. Maybe I got lost at the end of that, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, it was a nice little rant. I think that I don't know what will happen out of it. I suppose we just have to focus on the conditions that we think, the creation of the conditions that we think will allow for a greater participation and a greater joy, and what that looks like. I mean, we only know the elite model. Like American sport went the way that it went. You know, British sport, world sport, cricket, I suppose, maybe over. In Asia, different places, like sport has gone a certain way once it became commodified, and so we know it as an elite game. We know the inter-county game, or we know the Premiership, or we know the elite side of it. again, like I think it's just a fear of what would it look like if it wasn't that? What would it look like if all of our time wasn't dedicated towards that? I mean, I have to think about here. I had lovely conversations with Eoin about this, and I think that they're very worthwhile in the GA, and only in the GA context am I talking. I'm not saying rugby and soccer and other sports don't have the same possibilities, but in a GA context, if I am playing in, we'll say, on Gaeltacht, where maybe my child, you know, my little boy may want to play hurling soon, and or maybe football, and we go and we might start up a little small hurling team, or we might play a little bit of football, and he just the central focus of the experience is playing there. And I see then on Gaeltacht, I meet, you know, the 200 or 300 other people who go to the club, and I've chosen to be here, and they all feel the same, and they've chosen to be here. And the championship there's more investment in it, I suppose, in terms of energy, not in terms of money, but in terms of energy from the GA, and more centrally, there's more energy in the GA club and their focus at a local level. Then, you know, the championship down here is a more serious thing, maybe, and it's going to be there's a broader interest in it locally, and that makes me want to stay in this locality, or in my locality, or people all over the country in their locality a little bit more, because there's a little bit more meaning. They're not just cast aside to the very end of the season where it's run off in 6 weeks. So I think that the possibility is, but it's coming, of course, from the mindset that urbanisation is a dangerous thing. Like, that's how I feel about that. So I think for there to be less of a movement from rural places into urban settings, like, I think overall that's a more beneficial strategy. I think the government would have different ideas, but I think when we're more populated out here, it gives meaning to areas, it gives meaning to places, it gives life to places, it gives culture to places, it breeds a certain energy into a place. And the GA is one of the very uniquely placed organisations to really add to the value of people's lives in country and in rural areas. So I think there's definitely divestment in the trappings of the elite game, and a movement towards increasing energy and increasing time and increasing focus and increasing sponsorship, or whatever it is, TV deals or whatever, moving more and more towards the club in terms of focus, gives local areas, gives small towns and villages more of a reason to be. And when you've got young fellas then, 23, 24, if I see them in Ventry and they're out running, like, I know the old lads in the area, like, I know that they love to see that, like, they love to see the young fellas out, because it means that they've stayed, it means that they're here, and that gives them, it impacts the whole community. When you go for a run, you're not going training, like, you're not going, that's what you think you're going training, but you don't realise that every window that you pass and every body you pass along the way is looking with joy in their heart at the fact that you're there. Yeah. And that's like, this is, when looking at where we are in the context of the last year, that kind of stuff. Like, the other stuff has fallen, the lattes have fallen away quick enough, like, but that stuff, that's the gold, man. That's the gold. And so how do we cultivate and create it? By conversations like this, definitely. But also, yourself and Eoin getting out for a few pucks, or yourself and whoever you want to getting out for a few pucks and organising those games and doing it. And if enough people start doing it, then more and more will follow. It's true. Diarmuid, always great to talk to you. Congratulations on the new baby. Hope everything's well, and I hope your whole family as well. Thanks a million for joining us. Thanks, Jar. Lovely. Take care. See ya. Slán on. Diarmuid Lyng giving us some thoughts on the future of Irish sports. OTBFuture is the hashtag that we're filing all this stuff under. If you want to give us some thoughts on that, we'd love to hear them. Leaders' Questions with John Gordon is coming up at noon on OTB Sports Radio. OTB Gold, Michael Eoin, Life After Football. Our Legends interview at 3 o'clock is Ronnie Whelan. You can tweet that now, Ronnie. Retro panel is when GA meets basketball at 4, which, if I'm not mistaken, is Liam McHale, Kieran Donaghy and Jason Sherlock, which is a sensational Saturday panel. And OTB Gold is Dennis Ogie-Moran at 6. Talking about the life and times of one of the great Kerry footballers. Tonight, obviously, Wednesday Night Rugby, the football show, and the very latest in our OTBFuture series as well. Right, John Duggan is with us. John, good morning to you.
Jaron Owen, how are you getting on?
We've been talking about the future of sport. I know we're supposed to do your bulletin first and virtual insanity too, and we will get to all that, I promise. But What was your crack as a kid? Did you experience the joy of being on teams?
I did in primary school. I was a lodger, or a hatcher. Those guys who just, because there's no offside rule, obviously, in the playground, and you just hang around.
We call them goal hangers.
Yeah, I was an expert goal hanger.
Me too.
I was absolutely brilliant at it. And it would really annoy people because they do all the donkey work and I'd be just there and I'd just get the tap in for the goal. And you generally score 5 goals. And I had a really good playground experience as a young footballer. I remember there was one time when I scored at the lunch break. There's probably about 50 of us playing and there was only 1 goal. And I scored and everybody just moshed on top of me. And I remember that was a great moment. But then when I went to play for a schoolboy team, a well-known schoolboy team in the south of Dublin, I realised then I wasn't as good as I thought I was. And I remember just going on buses a couple of times to games and not getting in the look-in. And they would just, we'll give you some game time. We'll give it to you next week. We'll give it to you the week after. This is the early 1990s. And I just then quit and I felt quite deflated about it. And I felt that this was so competitive that unless you're good, you're not really going to get a look in. Now, it did allow me to get to a place where in my later life, I was very competitive about being in sports media as something that not would make up for that incident, but realizing that, that wasn't for me. But I would have loved at the time to have been given a chance. In the way Pat Daly was speaking about the other morning, that everybody should get a go. And I think hopefully now, 30 years on, things have changed. I would hope so. But that was my experience at the time. And
soccer's not bad because at least you can access 5-a-sides. There is definitely a way to do it. But, until they invented tag rugby, it was impossible really to play that. And it's interesting to hear Diarmuid talk about the social GA matches too. So we'll come back to that a little bit later on as well. But that is really interesting to hear, John, that you have a fairly similar experience to Neil Tracy where you wanted to play, couldn't get game time. And I think that happened to millions of young Irish kids over the last 2 or 3 years, or 2 or 3 decades.
Yeah, and I think one of the things I noticed about, and I've been kind of listening to the conversations, the great conversations you've all had over the last few days. When I went to Rio for the Olympics, everybody there was extremely active. They were running, they were jogging, they were walking. Now, the weather helps. Obviously, it's a tropical climate. But there was that sense of everybody is active in this country. PE should be just as important as any other subject on the curriculum. And even if you do pass PE, and there's an easier way of weighting the grading because, look, obviously some people are just don't have the aptitude for it. But if there's a way of getting that into even the senior cycle on a regular basis, I know that it's been trialled in some schools. It needs to be thought of in that way because, as Niall Moyna was saying, this is the stuff that equips you for later life. And this is the stuff that will help you perform better anyway in academic pursuits or business pursuits anyway, because if you feel good about yourself. But also, the inclusion part of it. How many, players in professional sport have had disappointments? You read all about, even when you're growing up and that player played for that club, was on the books. Graham Souness was on the books of Spurs. Matt Letitia was on the books of Spurs. They didn't make it at Spurs, but they made it at other clubs. And they got the break, but not a lot of other kids do get the break. And that's something we need to this is the chance in society to think about how we work, to think about like the GA club intercounty thing would never have happened if it hadn't been for the pandemic. And now they got the solution almost put into their laps. Working from home is something that now is being rushed onto us. We now need to think about it. And the way we think about how we address what young people do in terms of how they participate and they play sport in their teens is something we need to think about because we get the opportunity to do so now.
Okay, your Saturday panel this weekend is focusing on this. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to asking Sarah Keane about the Olympics because she's going to come in on, and obviously she works at Swim Ireland and all the sports they're supporting that wouldn't once again sometimes get a look in the national conversation.
Do you want to give us your virtual insanity this week? Yeah, well,
Tony Finau is a golfer that I tipped in the Farmers Insurance Open last year, and I was thinking I couldn't abandon him this week. And then I started to think about golf songs, and the Chicago song, "If You Leave Me Now, You'll take away the biggest part of me. And then I started asking people about golf songs on Twitter. Like, there was some really good responses, like, you can leave your hat on. I thought was very good. And the best one I heard was the old Tringale, which was quite good. But like, I had a few of my own, like Ricky, don't lose that number. Obviously, I the Tiger, hungry like the wolf. Every day I'm Scheffler. So Tony Finau is a headline tip for the Farmers Insurance Open. Why? Nearly won last week. Okay, he is a serial contender and not winner. He's only won once in the US Tour, but tied 6th, tied 13th, tied 6th, and tied 4th in the last 4 years of this tournament. 20-1 for 4 each way. You can check out these tips on OTBSports.com and on the app, the OTB app. And the other ones, Will Zalatoris, 2 each way at 50-1. Will Zalatoris, one of the best young players in America, blitzed the Satellite Corn Ferry Tour last season, topping the points list. He finished tied for 6th at the US Open. Then he had 2 further top 10s in the US Tour. So he's got his card for next season. He's playing with complete freedom. He bombs it. 5th in terms of strokes gained tee to green, and he's 8th in driving distance. Will Zalatoris, you're going to be hearing a lot more from him at 50-1 for 2 each way. The other two, Doug Ghim was 5th last week at the American Express, 125-1 for 2 each way. Doug Ghim, once again, has upped up his tour card. He was the best collegiate golfer in the USA in 2018, ahead of the likes of Colin Morikawa. He was a runner-up in the US Amateur. Doug Ghim is a really guy you should be keeping an eye on. He's a 24-year-old. And finally, Harry Higgs, great name, typical for an American golfer, 150-1 for 2 each way. 9th in this last year. Course form at Torrey Pines really tends to pay dividends when you continue to turn up every year. 65 in the last time in Hawaii, Harry Higgs. Bit like Shane Lowry, completely authentic. Grip it and rip it, makes a ton of birdies, and I love his attitude. Harry Higgs, Doug Ghim, Will Zalatoris, and Tony Finau. We cannot leave Tony Finau out this week. I think he's the headline tip for the Farmers Insurance Open. All
right, that's this week's Virtual Insanity. John, very quickly, what's happening in the world of sport?
Well, Man City are going to win the title. 5-0 over West Brom. No recognised striker. Gundogan scores twice. Thought they were very impressive last night. 11 wins in a row now for City. Arsenal, 3-1 winners away to Southampton. So they're, 4 points off the Champions League spots. West Ham in 4th. David Moyes took them over in 17th position, and they're now 4th in the table. A 3-2 win over Crystal Palace. Thomas Souček scoring twice. Jarek Harrison, great goal, 2-1 win for Leeds at Newcastle last night. Newcastle, no wins now in 11 in all competitions. Tonight, Man United playing Sheffield United at 8:15. A chance to go top. Everton, Leicester should be a great game. What else have we got? Other matches, including Brighton, I think, are playing as well tonight. If I can just check out the scores, Fulham and Brighton, and Burnley and Aston Villa. So that's what's going on tonight. The GA leagues at the end of March, that's what they're looking at for a resumption of the leagues.
Okay, fingers crossed we'll get them away at that point. If the figures continue to go in the right direction, that might actually happen. John, good stuff. Thanks a million.
All right, guys.
Really looking forward to that Saturday panel on Saturday afternoon with John. You can hear that on Off the Ball on News Talk on Saturday. We're going to cross over to Australia next to chat to Orla O'Dwyer, the Tipperary dual star playing with the Brisbane Lions in the AFLW. But we'd love to hear your stories too. 0879 180 180. A reminder, if you've missed anything from the show this morning, you can always catch it back on the OTB podcast network. So the best way to access our podcast network, you can get it on any of the podcast players or any of the apps that you use. The best one is our app, because we send you notifications anytime, if you turn them on, anytime that any of the podcast feeds that you subscribe to are updated, we'll let you know, and we'll ping you a little message and go, look, the AM boys, they're up and they're ready to go, as we are every morning from 7:30. And of course, you can also just listen to our live continuous stream of sports radio on the app as well. It's free, gratis, and for nothing in the App Store, or either of the app stores as well. OTB AM, live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. This is your first time on the show this week, Eoin, since we've started the OTBFuture Sports. Were you dropped off teams as a kid in a kind of soul-crushing manner?
I'm lucky enough to be from a place which isn't overly populated. So our problem was not having numbers for games rather than people being dropped off teams, thankfully, which is great, I guess, in hindsight. That's kind of the position you want to be in.
100%. Right, look, let's go to Australia. I'm delighted to say Orla O'Dwyer is with us. Orla, good morning here. Good evening to you. How's it going?
I'm very good. Thanks for having me on.
So listen, we're all jealous. Life seems pretty normal in Australia. What's it actually like?
Yeah, no, it's great here. It's crazy to see what's happening back home from talking to family and friends. But yeah, here in Brisbane, it's basically COVID-free. We did have a case a couple of weeks ago. One of the cleaners in hotel quarantine had the virus. So Brisbane then went in a 3-day lockdown, which isn't too bad. And then we had to wear a mask then for the following 10 days. But since that's over now, it's basically COVID-free so far anyway.
Wow, that's mad. So when did you head over there? When was the actual period that you were quarantining for?
So I came over at the start of November. I left Ireland the 5th of November. I think I was the first Irish girl to come over. I kind of had to make the decision to go during our championship season, so you're still involved with Tip Camogie and Tip Ladies Football. But I had flights already cancelled on me, and I didn't know what way I was going to go. So I was lucky enough to get a flight early November and get over here, and I quarantined then in the city in Brisbane for the 2 weeks. So overall, I just missed 2 weeks of pre-season, which is great. And yeah, I was very lucky to get over. Even seeing how the other Irish girls handled their quarantine, I was very lucky to get to go outside for maybe 4 or 5 hours a day. So that really helped me. Right,
so you got in before the really hardcore quarantining happened.
Yeah, I thought mine was hardcore at the time, but it seems like it's getting a lot stricter now.
So you were actually allowed out. It's got a kind of day release from prison for a few hours.
Yeah, so literally you could just call the reception and they put you on a list, and then any stage during the day, one of the guards would come up and escort you down to a kind of yard where you could just walk laps or do a little workout or something. So that really helped the day and broke it up for me.
And Orla, was it hard to leave an ongoing season? I guess it must have been.
Yeah, it was definitely a difficult decision, and it was so last minute as well. I actually only told the managers and my friends as well, literally 2 or 3 days before I left. My previous flights had got cancelled, so I didn't want to jinx it and tell everyone I was going. But yeah, it was definitely a hard decision. I missed the league, obviously, at the start of the year because being in Australia, so I was really looking forward to the championship, and we were lucky to have a championship as well, and I got to play the first few games. But yeah, I missed the quarterfinals and the last round of the football as well. But I knew that I had to come over here as well. I didn't want to miss much pre-season because I'd already be behind from missing the club series they had. So I was happy with my decision in the end, and I had my college deferred, and I think I was ready to come over.
How does your manager react when you tell him you're off again?
I think they knew I was coming out for another season, so it was just the time of when. So I actually am an Aussie citizen, so I didn't have to apply for the travel exemption. So I think that kind of freed up my time a bit. So I was just looking at flights, and the clubs were helping as well. So I kind of just let them know via text just a couple of days before. But I think they're happy, that I'm out here now. They understood the circumstances.
For sure, and I'm sure before you flew home, it was a no-brainer. Like as a professional athlete living the full-time lifestyle in Australia, is something you absolutely can't turn down. But when you're in that bubble, when you are back home, sometimes your decision-making, or everybody's decision-making, can get skewed a little bit. Was that the case for you? Was it a tough decision to make, basically, at the end, to say, no, listen, I'm done and I have to get on this flight?
Yeah, it was definitely tough. I think having lockdown helped as well, though. I was kind of sick of my family when it came to November at that stage. But it was definitely a hard decision. And my manager, actually, with Brisbane Lions, was in the same boat. He was in Switzerland all during COVID as well. He came back in March. So me and him were trying to find flights, and I knew myself that I didn't want to go into the AFL season on the backhand. I wanted to get the most out of this season. So I kind of just had to make the decision, and all my family and friends have been supportive of it. So I think it was just once the flight was set to go that I just couldn't really look back.
Yeah. Orla, anybody who has social media will have seen their friends in Australia jumping off yachts and downing cans and everything like that yesterday for Australia Day. What does Australia Day involve for a professional athlete?
We actually had our season launch yesterday, and then we train in afterwards. So we usually have the season launch maybe end of January, maybe start of February, but a few weeks prior, but we were actually a bit stuck with time, so it was very informal, just having family and friends around, and we just kind of the new players that were in the team just kind of got their day, and then afterwards we just had training. So yeah, it was good.
Do you get to enjoy life there? Like, I guess compared to what life would be here at the moment, it's of course a step up. I mean, Australia's in a much better place, COVID-wise. Are you appreciating the life outside of the training, or does there have to be a little bit of tunnel vision when it comes to being an AFLW player?
No, I actually love the lifestyle here in Australia. It's very outdoorsy and it's very kind of a healthy, active lifestyle, which I'd love anyway. But yeah, there is, especially during the pre-season and when you get into season, there is that they do have rules about not being able to go out, let's say, and stuff, and just really focus on the training. The season is very short as well. It only is 9-10 weeks and then it's over. So they try to get us in the best possible shape and try and really get a team together for those games. So I think everyone does appreciate and know how short the season is, that it's not that long to give up that time and dedicate to training.
Forgive my ignorance of this. Is this a shortened season? Like, would it have been a 9-game season if everything was all going well?
Yeah, so AFLW, the season is short anyway. So there's usually 2 conferences and you basically play out, and then there's 3 weeks of finals at the end, which is probably end of March, start of April time. And this year, obviously with COVID, there's still some restrictions getting into states, so they just have one kind of conference and they're still playing as many games. So I think it's 9 or 10 games at the moment, and then we have weeks of finals. So yeah, it is that short space of time. So it's game after game every weekend, so you just have to be ready for the next one.
Because it definitely seemed like the AFLW was on a massive upward surge before COVID, where, you know, they'd been very innovative about getting crowds to the stadiums. The TV coverage is getting lauded. It's like a load of teams where the men and women are training together a couple of times during the week, and just the hype around the league itself seemed to be really, really growing. So, you know, you hope that continues through the midst of what's happening at the moment.
Yeah, definitely. And even every year you can see how far AFLW has come. And even this year now, it's the fifth season. So compared to the first and second season, it's obviously grown massively in attendances, coverage, and everything in between as well. I think this year now as well, they're having paid entry into the games. So beforehand, it used to be free into all the AFLW games, but now they're having that paid entry and the crowds still come in. So yeah, it's great. It's great atmosphere, especially a home game, and it's something that is really good to see.
How excited are your Australian teammates for being broadcast live on TG Cahir over the next little while?
Yeah, it's great to hear that news. I think it's really good to see for people in Ireland and to see how the game goes as well, because even before I got drafted last year or applied through Crosscoders, I knew of the game but didn't really know how it went. And obviously Cora Staunton was the first one over, and then the likes of Sarah Rowe and Ashton McCarthy and Eilish Considine then following. You just kind of see a bit of on Twitter some highlights of the game, but to actually see the proper game and how it's played, I think a lot of people will really appreciate that back home in Ireland.
The fact that you're an Aussie citizen obviously helps as well.
Yeah, definitely. When I was younger, everyone used to say how lucky that would be for the future, but I didn't really realise until now how beneficial that actually is over here with setting up everything. It's just a lot easier.
And I presume it made you very attractive for whoever was drafting you as well, because it's less paperwork and all that kind of stuff, just makes it much easier for them too.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was a bit of, I think the clubs that were interested, it did help a lot. But I think still there is, like with the flights coming over and having to pay for a quarantine, especially this year, and making it it's a bit less feasible on top of missing the, let's say, club season as well. It is harder for Irish players to catch up and stuff. So I was definitely privileged to get the opportunity. And
do you think there'll be as many next year again? Or like, is this kind of the peak of it? What's your instinct on that?
It's kind of hard to know. I'd love to say yes. Like, I'd love to see more Irish girls come over and experience the game. And even just experience the professional lifestyle, which is so so great as well, on top of everything too. But it's just hard to know, because every club now has academies, so they've underage girls coming up, and a lot of more girls are playing it, and it's becoming more known as well. So it's hard to know, and because we have the Gaelic season and camogie back home that we still want to always play, it's hard to just get the balance between the two. So I'd like to say yes, so hopefully we still see a few more faces.
I was going to ask, it sounds like you love Australia so much you might end up staying out there, but you've just said that you want to play Gaelic and hurling every summer.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think AFLW is great, but I think the sport that you played all your life and you know the roots to will always be so important and privileged to play. So yeah, I'm hoping to go back and play the championship with Tipperary as well this year, if it goes ahead, and I'm really looking forward to that. And even last year when I got back in March, I was just ready to see the girls again get back in to train. And I think especially here in Australia, because the clubs can transfer and you can move to different clubs and you can see girls in the draft switching teams all the time, I think it's great back home the way you can see everyone just plays with their county, and that's their county the whole way up. And I think that really means a lot to people.
Well, we're having a series of conversations with various people involved in sport at different levels, administrators and scientists and just participants this week about the future of Irish sport. Essentially what happened was the Sport New Zealand, the umbrella body for all the sports, looked at dropout in New Zealand, and we're like, well, it turns out teenagers stop having fun because the pressure to win is one of the main things that they're coming under, and then they're also being told you can only play one sport because you have to give us your full attention, and they were just turning their back on it and being lost to sport forever. You obviously played a lot of sports as a teenager and didn't drop out. Are we getting better as a country in Ireland at keeping people, or were you fairly unique? Did loads of your friends drop out? What was your experience like?
Yeah, I definitely think the sport is growing, especially with women. You can see how well the camogie and the LGFA are doing as well, especially with the dual players too. But I think a big part of that is, for me anyway, was definitely my parents and family. Especially when you can't drive, going to all the underage games, having to get lifts and having to collect you. And I think that's a huge part of the underage coming up along. So I think if my parents weren't as interested, I don't know how or where I'll be today, let's say. So that's definitely a huge part, along with your circle as well. I was lucky enough that most of my friends are all sport related as well. And I'd say my best friends now are definitely the girls that I play along with and see a training all the time. So I think it's just that circle you're in as well. But yeah, hopefully now that in the next few years that sport in Ireland and women's sport does increase, and I think there's definitely a great place for it to go, and with coverage and everything, it's becoming bigger and bigger. So hopefully.
Well, you're bang smack in the middle of that with your story, and like it's amazing just the level of interest that there is in the 14 Irish women who are out there, and I think it's the Irish women's soccer team who are travelling around the world as well, and playing in America and playing in Germany and playing in England too. So these are great stories, and I don't know if you feel any pressure or if you feel any sense of being a role model, but you have become one kind of almost automatically now.
I don't know about that, but yeah, no, it's great to see, and even seeing people starting following the AFLW is huge. I like people being able to see how, let's say, life is here and other type of sports, and even people getting an interest in it too is great to see. So that's hopefully now in the next while we can see some more future stars come forward too.
You've got Richmond Lions this Sunday, is that right?
Yeah, so our first game is this Sunday against Richmond in Melbourne. So because of some COVID restrictions, we're actually doing a fly-in, fly-out game. So we're actually going down Sunday morning and then playing that afternoon and then flying back up Sunday evening. So a bit different to last year, where we usually go down the day before a game, do our captain's run and play the game the next day. So definitely has advantages and disadvantages, but I think everyone's so excited to get to play. We were meant to play Richmond the last game last year round 7, but it got obviously called off because of COVID. So there'll definitely be a bit of hunger there, and we're really excited to play them round 1.
Well, listen, best of luck, Orla. Great to chat to you. Thanks a million.
Great, thanks for having me.
It's Orla O'Dwyer there from the Brisbane Lions, and of course the Tipperary Camogie and football teams as well. If that is going to be, I think some of those highlights are going to be on TG4. Is it as soon as this weekend, Eoin?
They're showing live coverage or deferred coverage on top of that as well. So you've got highlights and you've got full games as well. Is it on this weekend? I haven't seen the fixture list for this weekend. I don't know what games are on television, but I can do that with a very quick Google and I'll be back to you in 2 seconds.
All right, 10 minutes past 9 here this morning. Professor Niall Moyna was in conversation with Joe on the show last night about the future of sport in Ireland and just the general fitness levels that we have at the moment, to kind of plug in the academic side of this and also some fairly simple fixes to any of your own fitness issues and a quick fitness test that you can do. So if you've got an interest in that, you should stay tuned from 9:30. We've got Deal or No Deal with Phil Egan, and we're back talking Kerry football and telling you what game you can watch on TG4 next.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
This is OTB Sports Radio.
United fans will always love Damien Delaney for his goal that started the Palace comeback in the 3-3 draw with Liverpool. That is from Martin.
Yeah, I love United fans as well. You know, I've got nothing personal against anyone.
It's just business. It's just business.
It's an opinion.
It's just business. It's just business. You're just saying that, you know, you don't think United will win the league.
Agenda. Call it what it is. That's what
I like Man United. I want to see them dominate again. I want to see them back on top.
Off the Ball, Saturdays from 1 on OTB Sports Radio. Listen live on the OTB Sports app.
Bet smart this season with stat betting on the Boyle Sports app. For the first time ever, bet on shots, shots on target, tackles, passes, assists and more, all powered by Opta. Why not check out the hottest action on the biggest game of the week right now on the Boyle Sports app. Boyle Sports. This is betting. Need help? Contact gamblingcare.ie. 18+.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
Hey, it's 11 minutes past 9 this morning. What is the crack, Eoin?
So this weekend, TG4, and I think this is the case for pretty much every week, they're going to show full deferred coverage from a top match, which is Saturday, 5:10, obviously TG4, and then Monday at 8 o'clock, you've got highlights from the weekend's matches. So that brilliant GA show that they have on a Monday night on TG4 during the club and the county season, that's basically being replaced by AFLW on a Monday night, which is just a brilliant idea. So I presume they're going to make the decision on the game later in the week. So 5:10 Saturday, you're going to see AFLW on TG4.
All right, it is 12 minutes past 9. Let's do Deal or No Deal.
I signed for them after the Euros, and after my first day's training, I was driving home. I was actually thinking, regretting it. What have I done? Like I walked into a circus. It's amazing, isn't it?
Phil, good morning to you again. How are you?
How are you getting on, lads?
We'll get into all our deals here in a moment, but I do want to just bring up the Pep Guardiola pre-match press conference where he called Big Sam Allardyce a genius. Was this Pep super trolling by knowing full well that his team were in incredible form and they were going to kill a team who they had a little bit of revenge in the air against that West Brom side who'd frustrated them so recently in a match? Was that what he was doing? Did he already know what the result was going to be? And he was like, oh, this guy's an absolute genius. Watch me tear him apart.
Well, Big Sam will be a genius if he keeps West Brom up by the looks of it. I mean, he kept them in the changing room for an hour after the game to tell them a few home truths. But going back to what Guardiola said, obviously it's 6 weeks since that 1-1 draw. And obviously, following day, Bilic was sacked. But what City have done since has been pretty remarkable because, you know, they had a few games called off, but they've kicked on since that first half against Chelsea, where they obviously had a break. There was a game postponed against Everton because of COVID, and they were unbelievable in that first half. And since then, they've shown exactly why they were the pre-season title favourites. And we kind of wondered that day at Stamford Bridge, was it a case of City are unbelievable again or Chelsea really bad? I think the way things have transpired, a bit of both, where obviously City have gone on to win all their games and Chelsea have sacked Frank Lampard. But I think City would have known going into that game last night they were going to win. But sometimes as well, Pep says lovely things about managers because it's almost like Big Sam gets lulled into a false sense of security going, Pep ain't so bad. Maybe I won't park the bus as much as we usually do. And then, boom, Pep and City absolutely smashed them 5-0. And some of the goals you saw last night, you saw Mahrez scoring that classic goal that he scored the season Leicester won the league, where he's going to cut in on his left. You just can't stop him. Sterling with his customary pat miss from 2 yards out because Mahrez put it on a plate for him. And Gundogan's just gone to a different level in terms of his finishing.
Yeah, looking really dangerous at the moment. And if they get De Bruyne back in 5 or 6 weeks' time, all's going to be well, and maybe they'll get a striker in the form of the returning Sergio Aguero from COVID, so we'll see. There is today's the 27th, not long left, a couple of days left remaining in the January transfer window. The question that we asked in December has not been answered yet. Will Liverpool sign a centre-back, and what happens if they don't, Phil?
Well, I think it's too late now. Even if they sign a centre-back, the reason people were having this conversation in December, it was because they were dropping points. We mentioned West Brom. You think back to that game, the West Brom game, the 1-1 draw, where Joe Matip goes off in the game, and when he's off the pitch, West Brom get the equaliser. Looking at the league table now, Liverpool are obviously 7 points behind City. Just looking at things, if they've won those games, so think back to Liverpool obviously beat Spurs, then they go and they beat Palace. And you think, look at their fixtures. They've got West Brom, they obviously have Newcastle, they have Southampton, Burnley, and they have Manchester United. Say for example, they don't beat United, but they win the other games. They're ahead of Man City. They're 4 points ahead of Man City with the same games played. But now they're 7 behind, and City obviously go to Anfield in a few weeks, but damage is done. Liverpool are not going to win the league, and a lot of it is down to, the injury. Virgil van Dijk, at the start of the season, they took a calculated risk. Lovren had gone. They said, right, Van Dijk never misses games, so it's Van Dijk +1. So you have Van Dijk plus Joe Gomez. Joel Matip, I would always play ahead of Gomez, but obviously Matip is always injured. And then you have the option of playing Fabinho, which he played at Stamford Bridge when they won 2-0 earlier in the season, beside Van Dijk, and he was excellent. But obviously Van Dijk gets injured and the plans go out the window. Now, what do you do? See, if you want to play centre-half for Liverpool, they're looking for a certain type of player, and the way they obviously want to balance the books, they don't want a stopgap where in 6 months' time there's surplus to requirement because Van Dijk is back and Gomez is back, and they're looking at this player that they've brought in as a stopgap, thinking, we don't actually need you. But that's why people would suggest, why not just get a loan deal done? Because what you're taking away, obviously, from the fact that Fabinho is now playing as a centre half. He's done a very good job, but you're now missing that bite from Fabinho in midfield. And it was very noticeable the other day as well. Obviously, Reece Williams played, and I don't think the lad should be anywhere near the team, but that's where they're at the moment. But I still think Jurgen Klopp surely looks at that situation against Manchester United in the Cup game. Okay, I know it's only the FA Cup, but what are United brilliant at? They're brilliant at counter-attacking with space in behind them. Reece Williams is not as quick as Joe Gomez. He's not as quick as Virgil van Dijk. Surely you say to your centre halves, just sit a little bit deeper and take away a bit of that space. I know you think back to the Arsenal game at the start of the season where people were looking at that high line going, it's ballsy at times. But Klopp said after, you look at the risk and reward, and the reward is far greater. But that includes when you're playing Virgil van Dijk. Van Dijk ain't there anymore, so the risk and reward now, the balance has flipped there.
I mean, look, it's a question we can never know the answer to. But would a manager less wedded to his system have adapted differently than Klopp has adapted this year?
Well, I mean, Klopp is looking at the system that he's played, and he said, I've won the Champions League, I've won the Premier League, so why would I change anything? And I don't think it's a drastic change to say to your back four, just sit in a little bit.
Does that not then mean the gap between them and the midfielders is so big that there's space there and you get torn apart slightly differently?
No, I'm talking about bringing the whole unit back, because I know it obviously depends on, you don't want a gap between the midfield and defence.
You're not pressing anymore.
Well, you could still press, but maybe your press doesn't start as high up. You wait till that first ball is played into the midfield area and then you swarm the opposition then. I know Liverpool like to put you under pressure from very first ball played out by the goalkeeper. So, look, I think the encouraging thing from Liverpool's point of view, even if I don't think they're going to win the league this season, but it's not like previous times over the last 30 years where when things go wrong, there's no sign of them kind of getting back up to that level. The bottom line is that at the start of next season, they'll have Van Dijk back and maybe they'll be a bit re-energised. Look what happened to City last season. They were way off Liverpool and they've regrouped. I just think if Liverpool had won those games and got ahead of City, it would have put them under a lot more pressure. But now City obviously looked around and they thought, nobody's really running away from this. City and United were both very slow out of the blocks. They started their season a week later than everyone. They didn't get the pre-season going as quick as the other teams as well. And now they're the two teams at the top of the league. But City look like they're just going from strength to strength. And they're 7 points ahead of Liverpool. They'll be further ahead.
We did say at the time that the right thing for Liverpool to do once they'd won the league was to stop chasing points totals and stop chasing anything that's the point where they should have taken a bunch of their frontline players off at the end of last season. The league was won. Stop playing them in games. Put them on holidays. Bring them back for a full pre-season and get ahead of teams. They didn't do that. And
yeah, but I don't think that's the problem though, Ger. I don't think playing them is the problem. I think the problem is when you don't play them. So okay, they take them out for the end of last season and put all those point totals aside. The drop off is still too much. As in, you say to your front three, okay, obviously they've brought Jota in who's injured at the moment, but you take, say, Firmino and Salah out of the team and you're putting in the likes of Origi and Shaqiri. They're just not the same. You might get away with it in a one-off game. Like you think back to the night that they beat Barcelona 4-0 and there was no Salah or Firmino, and Shaqiri and Origi came up with some big moments in that game. But over the course of, say, 5 or 6 games, you don't get away with it. The drop-off just is too much. And we've talked about this before at Liverpool. Their first 11, I still think if they have their fully fit first 11, they beat City in a one-off game.
It's a better game this season than it has been in recent years. One last point on this, right, is that I think they're really going to regret not making the signing at this point, because they're a club that has been so well run. When you're making the case that they'll have a spare wheel at the end of the year when Gomez comes back and when Virgil is back, that they'll have this other centre back if they were to buy somebody. But so what? They're really rich. They've had a brilliantly run transfer kitty and campaign over the last 4 or 5 seasons where they've sold squad players for ridiculous amounts of money, and they will probably be able to do that again if they so desire. That they could have afforded to make the summer investment, bring it forward into whatever centre back they're going to buy. So Upamecano is on our list here, that he's obviously a massive target now, obviously going to be linked with Tuchel straight away, and could be a transformative type of defender at a club like Chelsea. But maybe him plus Virgil is your defence of the future, and instead of waiting until the summer to spend that money, you spend it now, and if it doesn't work out now immediately, then at least you know what your centre-back partnership is going to be for the next 5, 6, 7 seasons.
Yeah, I suppose with Upamecano, from what I see him, is a very raw player, and going back to what I was saying about the high line, you've got to be comfortable playing in a defence where there's a lot of space in behind you. Ball is going to be played over you. How do you react to that pressure, knowing that one slight mistake and the opposition are in, and some defenders just are not able to play that game? I suppose Liverpool are going to get a good look at Upamecano when they play Leipzig in the Champions League, and I would imagine he's not going anywhere between now and the end of the season. So maybe they look at him that night or over the 2 legs and they think, yeah, this guy has what it takes to be a Liverpool defender. But yeah, they could have fallen in the pecking order, because if he goes to Chelsea, he obviously gets to play with you're looking at, say, he'll probably play with Thiago Silva. It'll be interesting to see how that Thiago Silva and Tuchel partnership or relationship works. I know Thiago Silva said a few things after Tuchel was sacked by PSG. I don't think there was anything too controversial, and he just said it was predictable. But I mean, is that really that controversial? It's like,
no, and Christian Falk,
controversial to say Tuchel's going to be sacked by Chelsea.
No.
In the future, we know that's going to happen.
Christian Falk was making the point on the show a little bit earlier on, though, that actually Tuchel was lobbying for a new deal for Thiago Silva, and that it didn't happen, and that was one of the reasons why, that was one of the fights that he had with Leonardo. So what should Tuchel's number one priority be as manager now, coming in and saying, whenever he has those angry conversations with whoever decides the transfer policy at Chelsea, what's he looking for?
I think he is actually looking for a centre half, because I'm not convinced by Kurt Zuma, but it's also quite noticeable that they're not great on set pieces. Now, I sometimes attribute a team that's not good from set pieces as they're not set up properly, and that comes down to the coaching staff. And it touches on something that James Maddison said last week after they beat Chelsea. He said, we've watched Chelsea, we know they can nod off at times set pieces, which is not really a great endorsement for the Frank Lampard coaching ticket, that opposition players are saying, yeah, you go to sleep. And that's why they took a short corner. That's where the first goal came from. And obviously they tried to sort out the goalkeeper, and Mendy started well, but in the last few weeks, but like every Chelsea player at the moment, none of them really are playing that well. Obviously Kepa was thrown in for the Luton game and did what he's been doing for the last couple of years, let in a pretty bad goal. But I think centre half is definitely a position. Thiago Silva is 36, so he's not going to be around for much longer.
Okay, let's fly through some of these. With experience at Chelsea and Derby County now on his CV, which is actually pretty short, Frank Lampard's sacking raises many questions. Will he have a new club by the start of next season? What level should he manage at next? And is there anybody who should be snapping him up?
This was my first thought when he got the Chelsea job, was when it goes wrong, because it goes back to, look, we know how things end with Chelsea. It's what you can do before it ends. And unfortunately for Frank Lampard, he hasn't done enough for other Premier League chairmen or owners to say, yeah, we'll give this lad a go. So does he go back to the Championship? How does he find that going back to the Championship after getting his dream job? And obviously he's not there anymore. Does he have to build himself back up? He had a season there with Derby, and people say, oh, he got to the playoffs. Derby got to the playoffs the season before, and Lampard came in and, pretty much did the same. They got to the playoff final. One of the big pluses for them that season was Mason Mount, who we got on loan at Chelsea, from Chelsea. Obviously then, quite fitting that he gave Mount the captain's armband for his last game in charge. We know that Frank Lampard is a fan, so it'll be interesting to see how Mason Mount gets on under Thomas Tuchel. But yeah, I'm sure, look, Mick McCarthy's taking charge of Cardiff tonight. He's got another Championship job within a few weeks of being sacked by Applewell. So there will be clubs that will take a chance on Frank Lampard, but there's only so many chances you can get.
Well, are there? He's English, so there's going to be loads of chances, right?
Well, he's got a lot of people batting for him in the media. Anyway, we've seen that from the last few days.
Okay, wouldn't we all love to see Lampard versus Gerrard in the next Old Firm?
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, it's been a while since we've had a discussion on who's better, Lampard or Gerrard. So at the moment, even if Lampard went to Celtic, Gerrard and Rangers are ahead of them, because the wheels have come off so badly for Celtic in the season that mattered most, and they've been in an absolute shambles. But yeah, now is not the time to be going in as a Celtic manager. They look like they're sticking with Neil Lennon for the time being. I'm baffled by that. I can't believe he's still there, given, as I said, what was at stake for Celtic this season. But maybe that's something that would happen next season. But yeah, in fairness, you look at what Brendan Rodgers did. He went to Celtic and kind of got his confidence back, and look how things have gone for him since. Maybe Lampard needs something away from England, but because you're Frank Lampard, the spotlight's always going to be on you.
Okay, so the next one on our list here is Declan Rice. West Ham very happy about the fact that there's been regime change at Chelsea, because they believe this will signal the end of the club's interest. That's according to the Telegraph. He's under contract with West Ham until 2024. Do you expect him to be a West Ham player next season now?
At the moment, I think so, yeah. I think things are going well for West Ham. He's effectively become the captain because Mark Noble's not getting into the team anymore. And I kind of feel with Rice, it could be a similar situation to Jack Grealish, where they're going to get priced out of it, other clubs, because they're going to put such a huge price tag on these players. And it's funny that these are two lads that could have played for the Republic of Ireland, that if they were playing for Ireland, their price tags would probably be half of what they are now. So
they could actually get the move to the dream club that they want. So yeah. The agents done them up like a kipper here. The short-term greed.
Yeah.
Oh, what a pity. L'Équipe claim Spurs have expressed their interest in signing Di Maria when he becomes a free agent this summer. 32 would bringing him back from PSG to the Premier League be a smart move by Mourinho?
It'd be a typical Mourinho move where he just keeps adding to his squad. Not necessarily a player that's going to get into his team every week, but you look at the team that he fielded against Wycombe the other night. Di Maria gets into that team, whether he can get into the Premier League starting 11. But certainly a player that would suit the way Mourinho likes to play, that play on the counter-attack. That's where he was so good for Mourinho at Real Madrid, where we've seen how good he's been at PSG since he went from Manchester United. So, yeah, like with Mourinho, we know how it's going to end, and whoever comes in as the next Spurs manager is going to have some really good players.
What do you think that's going to happen soon?
With Mourinho?
Yeah.
He's obviously, this season is this is his season. I don't think it'll go as well for him next season, and then that's probably it then with Mourinho for Spurs.
Okay. The paper also reports PSG will offer Julian Draxler, 27, in exchange for Matteo Guendouzi. Who'd win in that deal, Eoin? Should Arsenal make that happen?
That's a good one. Guendouzi's been involved in another inside the club bust up recently, hasn't he? Which doesn't necessarily paint things too well. Like, I think if Arsenal can be doing as much as they possibly can to get rid of Guendouzi, I think that's all the positivity that they need. I think that, like, you can make a case that he is a player who might start for Arsenal if he fulfills his potential over the next little while, but clearly the manager has made a decision on his future at the club, and he was in the same bracket as Mesut Ozil, where he doesn't really want him. So he's the boss, he's the gaffer. What he says goes, and what he says goes with Matteo Guendouzi is, I don't want you at my football club. So any win there where he's not an Arsenal player, I think is probably any situation where he's not an Arsenal player is probably a win.
Interesting to see Draxler in the Premier League as well. 34-year-old Edin Dzeko has fallen out with Roma and could be on his way back to the Premier League. Gazzetta dello Sport report that West Ham and Everton are keen to sign him. Should one of those clubs add him to their squad? Could he go to Manchester City? Where could he go?
I think West Ham would be a good move for him, because West Ham obviously are a little bit light up front. Obviously, Allaire is gone. Allaire was never an out-and-out striker. He was never your lone striker, and never was that more evident the night they went to Anfield, because Mikel Antonio was injured, and Allaire stood there up front on his own. Long balls played up to him, and Nat Phillips was made look like Franco Baresi. He just won everything in the air. Whereas Antonio obviously gives them a different dimension. But unfortunately for Antonio, just a few issues with his hamstrings. You tend to see that with explosive players where they pick up hamstring injuries. But Dzeko would certainly be a decent player to have. Obviously, good target man and a good finisher. And maybe he'd probably get more game time at West Ham than Everton. But Everton is an attractive proposition for a player right now. You get to play for Carlo Ancelotti, and they're going well. And if you're up front, you're probably going to be playing in a two-man attack with Dominic Calvert-Lewin.
Yeah, or they rest him and you replace him and you get to score some goals, because that's the focal point of the attack. So, all right, good stuff, Phil. Thanks very much for that. Cheers. Cheers, lads. Today's Deal or No Deal.
I signed for them after the Euros, and after my first day's training, I was driving home. I was actually thinking, regretting it. What have I done? Like I walked into a circus.
It's amazing, isn't it? OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Tomorrow morning, we've got Niamh Briggs completing our Irish Rugby Depth Chart series as we focus on the back three. There's all the reaction to tonight's football and much more as well. We're continuing with another piece from our OTBFuture series. That's the hashtag we're using as we examine the future of sport in the country. Here's Professor Niall Moyna talking to Joe about the health of the nation.
If I start with kids initially and get your sense of where we are, I mean, I was at the ESRI study in 2013, I think it was a massive study, 70,000 people. Dr. Pete Lunn was there. And certainly at that stage, I don't know to what extent the picture has changed, but at that stage there was, a fair degree of happiness that all primary school kids were engaged in a fair amount of activity. And then second level, as people might know anecdotally, is when the drop-off happened, especially girls. So for instance, well, actually, I'll come to drop-off in a second. If we start with primary school, the most recent information I looked at was that 1 in every 5 Irish primary school children are overweight or obese. And apparently that's an improvement. And, because these things are often doomsday. So this seems to be an improvement. So 1 in every 5 Irish primary school children overweight or obese. What do you want to say about the kids?
I think there's a few things. I think we've spent too much time scaring people. Things are not as bad. Now, the problem with a lot of these surveys, you're going out and you're asking kids to fill in a questionnaire. And there's a huge issue with that. Because if you look at the current, most recent report, according to that, only 10% of Irish kids between the ages of 10 and 18 meet the minimum recommended daily dose of physical activity, which is 60 minutes of moderate or vigorous intensity activity. Okay. That's basically what the questionnaire data is telling us.
So kids should be doing an hour every day and only 1 in 10 are getting that?
Correct. Between the ages of 10 and 18.
Do you know a point on that as well? So I was lucky enough to grow up in a generation where helicopter parenting wasn't as prevalent as it is now. Now, I'll be a helicopter parent, don't worry. And the digital revolution hadn't taken hold. So I played on the streets. And we, from memory, weekends, you're pretty much out the whole time. You're doing whatever. There was a rollerblading phase. There's football constantly. There's climbing trees. There's tip the can. There's a million different pursuits. And UCC had a very interesting study recently where they said that skills generally mastered by 6-year-olds, and we're talking all of the stuff I've just referenced, jumping, throwing, catching, hitting, we played rounders, all of this stuff. So UCC looked at a bunch of 12 or 13-year-olds, and a lot of them aren't able to do what the 6-year-olds should be able to do. And so that comes back to this whole area of play on the streets. That's a social change. But I don't know if the advice, just send your kids out and we did it in my day, out you go, is going to really work with parents today. So, when we're trying to get kids active and that 1 hour a day, that's now going to fall on the schools increasingly, isn't it?
It is. We have to go back, I suppose, even I'm older than you, so I'm a product, I grew up in the 60s. When probably we were the only house in the village, or maybe 2 others with a TV, all black and white. And when you had to change the channel, you had to get up with your backside. And although we only got UTV up and running, we didn't get RTE at the time. You had one station. So life was about unstructured play. It was, we had a wall in the front of our house in the middle of the village, and right in the centre of the village, and you threw a goals on the wall, and you spent hours upon hours out on the front street. And that was unstructured play, and it was a wonderful time. Times have changed, and whether we like it or not, the genie is out of the box.
Yes.
Because kids today live in a digital era.
Yeah.
And this thing about take away their phones, the phone is an extension of them. It's like the end of the world to take a phone away from a kid. It's part of who they are now. So I think we have to teach kids to live along with this technology. Because remember, prior to the Industrial Revolution, which isn't that long ago, we spent most of our time hunting and foraging for food. We were physically active all day. So our genes over 4 million years have evolved for us to be physically active. And when we're not physically active, it is amazing how quickly those genes maladapt and we develop diseases. Right. And people have this perceived notion, well, they're only kids, they're okay, they're fine. Most of the chronic diseases that afflict the modern society, their genesis are in childhood.
Right.
And the longer
I suspect the overweight or even obese kid doesn't tend to turn that around.
No, I think, and I'm glad you brought that up, because my concern, believe it or not, I believe, and this is a hunch of mine, we've ran a schools fitness challenge for the last 10 years. So we've collected data, a bleep test on 213,000 kids over a 10-year period. So it's a pretty large study.
Okay.
But it's only in one of those 4 components. It's only in cardiovascular fitness. We haven't measured their strength. It was something that we're hoping to do in the future, is to take those 4 fitness components. But my concern is, I think the top 75%, they're pretty okay.
Right.
I think the bottom 25% are falling off a cliff. Falling off a cliff. And I think they're going to be, probably that bottom even 20% will result in probably 90% of healthcare spending in 50 years, 60 years. It's so just those individuals. Because they're overweight, they're inactive, and it's very, very hard to get them engaged even in play and in fun activities.
And have you been able to identify the reasons as to why they are headed for that cliff? I mean, socioeconomic issues have to come into play, I presume.
Yeah, we have preliminary data in that school's fitness challenge that shows that if you are a boy or a girl, but particularly a girl, and you go to a fee-paying school, you're much more likely to meet the minimum fitness requirements for optimal cardiovascular health compared to a kid who goes to a dash school.
Okay.
So we know that the social inequalities are there. To be fair, the Irish government, we really try hard to decrease that level of inequality. It is difficult. There's intergenerational issues that are very, very difficult to break, but I think we're very aware of them. Teachers are aware of them, schools are aware of them, but it is difficult. And we're living more and more in urban areas, and safety and access to safe environments is becoming an issue. You know, being honest, Joe, and I'm not wearing my GAA hat here, but can you imagine what the infrastructure in the sporting infrastructure in Ireland would be like if the GAA hadn't have existed? We've only started to spend money on sporting infrastructure in the last quarter of a century.
Yeah.
Prior to that, the government spent nothing. You know, it was left to the device of the local clubs or whatever the case may be. So we failed for 100 years, and we started probably when it was too late. And I think I would like to see an awful lot more municipal facilities that every sport can use. It's not GAA specific, it's not soccer, it's not rugby. You build these facilities, particularly in our towns and our urban areas, that all kids get access to, regardless of what sport that you actually play.
Okay. So let's get into adolescence then, and we'll leave behind the kids. And again, 1 in 10 from memory, you said there, are getting their 1 hour of daily activity.
Well, sorry, Joe, could I just state something before you go on?
Yes,
I spoke to Mick Bohan, who is a PE teacher, and everyone would know Mick. He's coached the women Dublin's football team.
Yeah.
And he's been teaching PE now for up to 30 plus years. And his biggest issue at the moment, and it goes back to the Cork study, is that the kids coming into secondary school don't have the basic fundamental motor skills to engage in physical education.
Okay.
So that's analogous to a kid coming into secondary school and not doing basic arithmetic and then asking them to do algebra in first year. It just won't happen. Or to teach, the reading, writing and arithmetic. So we have a huge problem, and I think we need to spend, before you go on from the primary school, I think we need to take a hard look, and the ASTA are totally opposed to this. We've got to get to grips with we're living in the 21st century. We need to there's nothing more important to a child in national school, I don't care what anyone tells me, than their health. And we're neglecting it. And we need to send qualified physical education teachers into our primary schools. And it could be one teacher for every 3 schools. And they could be able to, in addition to providing classes, could also upskill the teachers that are currently there. But left to the devices of teachers who have an interest in activity or sport, that is simply not good enough.
Okay, so at the moment you're too much at the whim of a given teacher, and you hope they're into their sport and they do a good job as a PE teacher, but you could be unlucky in that regard.
Correct.
Yeah, that would have been my school experience. Some years good, some years not so good.
Yeah.
And therefore we're producing 12 and 13-year-olds who arrive into Mick Bowen's class, and when it comes to basic motor skills, jumping, throwing, catching, hitting sports balls, hand-to-eye coordination, they're behind where they should be.
And can you imagine how that makes a kid feel in class, in front of their peers?
Yeah.
You know, the ball hits you in the eye when you go to catch it. That must be terrifying for a kid.
Yeah. So in effect, everybody out in the green in the housing estate, my experience, that made up for what the issues in primary school PE.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Okay.
For years.
So into the adolescence, and I'm going to play in a moment Mickey Quinn. By the way, he was on OTB AM this morning. He's a PE teacher, Longford footballer. I know you know Mickey as well. So and maybe you were part of this. Maybe this is what you're referencing. The Irish Health Schools Fitness Challenge, 2017. 30,000 students in this instance. So they came up with lots of interesting data. One third of 16-year-old girls, do not meet the fitness levels that can prevent diseases. So we're not talking making the Olympics, we're talking preventing diseases. That's a third of girls by the age of 16. And for boys, it's 2 in 5. Again, we're talking preventing diseases. Do you know what jumps out here is for girls, it's a third when they get to 16. It's only 8% at 12. So between the ages of 12 and 16 is when this thing explodes.
Yeah, I have the data actually here in front of me. That is the work that we have done. And it is, it's very, very clear that it's after the age of 14, 12 to 14, based on our 10 years of data, that particularly in boys, fitness levels improve at first year, second year, but then after third year, and we see this drop off in sport at the same age. The fitness level in boys no longer continue to increase. The fitness level in girls, that does not change after first year. And actually, we believe the girls who we are getting to participate in the school's fitness challenge in third and fourth year are probably those who are physically active. So we're getting actually a biased sample. It's not really a true reflection. you know, of where we are with girls. And their numbers, obviously...
You mean the inactive girls are saying, sod that, I'm not doing your survey?
Correct. So therefore, they're not in it. You know, there are issues with girls in relation to, you know, makeup and breathing hard, and, you know, they've never felt this sensation, and they say, this is not for me. I don't want to get engaged with that. And maybe we have to find a different way to assess them. It could be through a dancing activity and measuring their heart rate response to that. I think we have to be more innovative using virtual reality. There are different ways of doing this. But I think, yes, going back to what we found is that as the students go through secondary school, their cardiovascular fitness levels either remain constant for girls or decrease. And we find that the proportion who don't meet the minimum requirement to maintain optimal cardiovascular health, which means if you're below this fitness level, you're at increased risk of developing cardiovascular disease. That number increases. It can be up as high as 50, 60%.
Okay. Do we have any good, reliable data on why they're dropping out?
Look, that's the $1 million question. That's a really, really difficult one.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you ask the majority of young girls in their 30s and women in their 30s and 40s, 50s, and you met them in the street and said to them, tell me about your experience in PE, it would be just so negative. I mean, my own wife told me yesterday about, you know, when she was in first year having to, you know, when she was developing and, you know, during that phase in her life, and she having to jump over a pommel horse and she landed. She said she was so embarrassed. She dreaded physical education for the rest of her time in secondary school. And the whole idea of changing and, you know, no showers and all of these issues. So I think that's one part of the puzzle. The other thing is kids get to 15 years of age, and if they have not been engaged, and I mean engaged in a meaningful way up until then, they get to 15 and they say, you know something, there's lots of other far more exciting things in life than playing some sport, going out and some guy shouting at me, you know, and I'm going to listen to music, or I'll take up some other hobby. And that's what happens with many of them.
Yeah.
We don't, you know, the top 10%, regardless of who coaches them, they're going to stay engaged in sport. You know, I laugh at this as though the coach is the person that... The vast majority of the people who play sport in secondary school have always loved sport. The challenge, the real challenge. And when I see year after year, we compare our schools, these metrics for schools and who's the top school in the country, I always say, show me the school that takes the bottom 20% of kids academically and sporting wise and gets them engaged, gets them a junior cert or a leaving cert. They're the real success stories. It's easy to take a kid who's highly motivated. How do you take a young girl or boy at 15 years of age who has no interest, no family support, and get them to be physically active? And particularly young girls who are arriving to school with notes, I think parents need to take a hard look at themselves, because... As in,
my daughter's not doing PE today.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because you're saying to that young daughter, we're going to make sure, or we're going to write a note that will allow you to be removed from probably the best form of medicine you could possibly get is physical activity, because most kids will adapt their health behaviours when they're very, very young. So if parents continue to do that, what I would like the parents to do is this: write a note and saying, I bought my child a headset and she's going to listen to music or a book, and I'd love her to go for a 30-minute walk during PE. Could you facilitate that? And if that young girl walked those 30 minutes every day for the rest of her life, the health benefits would be incalculable.
Yes. It can't be just one size fits all. PE is a really good point. Here's Mickey Quinn, by the way. So OTB AM this morning, they were having a similar enough chat. Mickey's obviously a Longford footballer and a secondary school PE teacher as well. Here's what Mickey was saying this morning.
I sat down last night and started to jot down a few points, and, you know, 12:30, 1 o'clock comes and you think, Jesus, I need to get to sleep here, because you're passionate about it, and that's why I enjoy my job and I love it, that you're passionate about educating and the importance of it. You know, there's such an importance placed on the Leaving Cert that it's a defining moment in kids' futures or where they're heading in life. Whereas realistically, the 6 months or 6 years after the Leaving Cert, where people and teenagers realise that, hang on a minute, the habits, traits and skills that I've learned or put in place for the Leaving Cert or around that time are what is going to live with me for years to come. And that's why, as a PE teacher, for me, in my opinion, and biased opinion at that physical education is the most important subject across the board. That if you don't have your health, all those other things that come after it is secondary.
And we're talking to Niall Moyna. If you've just tuned in, I'm sure you recognise the voice. So look, I mean, it sounds like, I mean, you can't but listen to you and somebody like Mickey this morning and be in any doubt as to the importance of this. I suspect at government level, they recognise it. You mentioned unions there being an obstacle. You mentioned various other issues floating around. I mean, you would hope we can make great strides very, very quickly if we all put our minds to it here.
Well, I think probably one of the biggest impediments is our healthcare system. Because, or I should say our disease care system, because our healthcare is designed around acute illness care. And that's the problem.
Okay.
We spend 3 to 5% of our annual budget on preventive medicine. It's spent, you get sick, you access the healthcare system. We need a seismic shift, a paradigm shift actually, in how medicine is run in this country. Now, I know that there is going to be a big shift from the hospital to community-based care of many of these acute illnesses, because people don't have one chronic illness. They tend to have multiple chronic illnesses now. So it's this multi-morbidity. But I hope when it goes to the community, it's not going to be the same, that we just end up being just polypharmacy, but delivered in the community. We have probably the most wonderful drug on earth, which is exercise. In fact, if we could package the known benefits of exercise in a pill, it would be the most prescribed wonder drug in the world. And I'll give you a simple example. We have a lot of people in this country go for stenting. Stenting for heart disease, you get a blockage in your artery, they put a stent in. That's a Band-Aid. That doesn't fix the problem. The same person goes out to walk. Their blood vessel remodels. It becomes healthy. You develop a healthy phenotype. Your heart remodels. So why it's only after we get the heart attack in Ireland, then you go to cardiac rehab. Could we not go to cardiac prehab to stop it in the first place? If you look at our hospitals, go into a cardiac rehab, go into any of the surgery clinics in Ireland. So go into the cath lab, multi-million dollars, millions of dollars spent, and look at the cardiac rehab in a hospital. It's stuck in some dingy corner in a little room. That's the problem. That's where lifestyle preventive medicine is in this country. Medicine is seen as you get sick and we give you a drug or a surgical intervention. We need to change that. That's the first thing. And the second thing is we need to focus on preventive medicine. And there's a cottage industry in Ireland on behavioural change. The hardest thing in the world to do is to change your behaviour. Look at the thousands of diets in the world, because none of them work. You're trying to change an ingrained behaviour. Can adopting a healthy behaviour not become the norm rather than try to change, a poor behaviour, a poor habit later in life? So I think we need to get both of those. You can't have one without the other.
Yes. To go from the adolescents into adults then, the information I've seen is that of the 30 minutes per day, which we should all be getting, about a quarter of adults hit that minimum. So look, I mean, speaking as an adult, here are the reasons. Look, I adore exercise. I love how it makes me feel. I am not in a great place if I go more than 3-4 days without it. However, we're all time poor. Team events aren't possible with work and various things, and often team events are a great way to do it, but we are a bit time poor. And also connected with that, we're often wrecked. We're working hard, we're stressed. And it's not easy to muster the motivation to do some exercise. There's some of the honest reasons why people don't do it. I don't know anyone who wouldn't like to exercise more. So it's really hard to do, and it's also difficult given lifestyles and everything else. So look, these are just some of the things you're facing.
Yeah, I mean, and I would say, Joe, yours is a biased perspective, because you're talking from the perspective of a guy that likes exercise. There are lots of people who don't like exercise.
Oh, sorry, plenty of times. Don't get me wrong. There's plenty of times I'm sitting at the couch saying, I'm an hour here, I should really go for a run. And my brain says, it's hard though. It's going to be hard. So I love it, and I love how I feel afterwards. But don't get me wrong, it's painful, it's uncomfortable. It takes motivation to do it.
Yeah, I think it comes back again to this perception of fitness and what I need for health.
Okay.
The key message I would like to get from this interview is that every bout of exercise counts, regardless of how short it is. If it's just 2 minutes, it's the sitting that's causing the prolonged periods of sitting. So no one should sit for more than 20 to 25 minutes without getting up for at least a minute. And research shows that simple getting up, walking up a flight of stairs, walking to the bathroom, whatever the case may be, that makes a difference. And, obviously we are time poor. But if we can't, it's only the day you get the diagnosis you say, oh, if only.
Sure.
But it's something that we have control over. And for the people who can't get the 30 minutes a day, and that's the problem, because we set this target of, and I should say the guidelines have now changed. It was 30 minutes a day. That's the ideal. But now they're saying, and I've been preaching this for years, if you can only do 10 minutes a day, but did it every single day of the year, that is much, much, much better than doing nothing. It's the doing nothing is the problem. So if it's 10, 15 minutes, or maybe every second day, make the effort to walk 5 minutes from your front door and 5 minutes back.
Okay. And look, I think 50 minutes is 1% of your day. So geez, we can all make that time for ourselves. So I'm coming to a question here, but give me those 4 areas of fitness again. Cardiovascular, balance.
Which is your heart and lungs.
Yeah.
Muscular strength and endurance.
Which is your weights.
Yes, yeah,
okay.
You're maintaining muscle mass.
Yeah, balance was another.
The third one then is ideal body weight. Okay, and particularly not carrying obesity, but not carrying a lot of excess weight in our midsection.
Yeah.
And then the fourth one is balance.
Okay. So those 4 are what we should all have in mind. If you're just tuning in, we talked about this more at the start of the interview. So, and you also gave some markers when it came to general fitness, which are important. It strikes me, it's really not unachievable to get over that line where you prevent a bunch of diseases. If you can just, it doesn't sound like it's a crazy demand on any of us to get to that point whereby your chances of having these diseases in later life drop dramatically. That's the kind of good news out of this, isn't it?
Without a doubt. I mean, we are living to around females 82, males 80 years of age in Ireland. But that's our lifespan. But the problem is our health span is being reduced dramatically. That is the years of life that we live with good health. So the vast majority of people in Ireland will live probably the last 30 years of their life with at least one chronic disease, if not more. And they'll be on polypharmacy. In an ideal world, we all like to do is live to 82 and compress our ill health into the last 6 months of our life. Right now, it's into the last 30 years, and the current generation of kids, for many of those, it'll be 40, 50 years. They will live, on multiple medications, undergoing surgery because of lifestyle. And the issue is that does not have to be. And you hit the nail on the head. We can change it through small changes. And you don't have to be in the top 5, the top 10%. If you're above average, it dramatically reduces your risk for developing these chronic diseases like high blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease, and even some forms of cancer and dementia. So many of those can be prevented. And think in the long term, the billions that we would save. Imagine using those billions for palliative care at the end of life and also for preventive medicine. And that's why I think we need a paradigm shift in our outlook to what we perceive health to be, because it's a disease-based model of disease care and not a health-based model of healthcare at the moment.
Okay.
And I should say, look, there are wonderful people in public health doing tremendous work. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But I would like to see the government being much more proactive and really spending money on preventive medicine. Now, each government is elected on our 5-year promises, and you won't see the rewards in your term. You won't see the rewards for a generation.
Well, you know how we measure health? The trolley count.
Yeah.
That's how you're judged. So this has to start at school. I mean, give me the Jesuits, give me the boy and I'll give you the man. In terms of our school system, is there a country that gets this right, that gets that hour every day, that develops all the motor skills, that is, delivering a 12-year-old and then 6 years later through Leaving Cert, a young adult who has a good grounding in those 4 areas of fitness and can look after themselves and they're in decent shape, to live the next 30, 40 years. Who are you looking at and where do we compare?
Well, Scandinavia seems to be the model, and it seems to be a large investment by their government, on preventive services as well. It's embedded. A healthy lifestyle is embedded. Now, as I said earlier on, you know, we have spent very little. Look at the infrastructure. They want people to go out and cycle. You're in a cycle lane, and all of a sudden it ends, you know, and that's it. You're on the road again.
Yeah.
You know, to be fair, we're trying to change that.
Yeah.
But we're trying to re-engineer our environment, and the environment is a big issue. And the reason I take up Scandinavia, they have much harsher winters than we have, and they've still managed to do it. And it's not always about money. You just have to look at I lived in the States for a long time, and, you know, obesity is an insidious disease. It just was developing around me, and the only time you would notice it, you come back to America from Ireland and you arrive at the airport, you say, oh my God, am I on a different planet here? Yeah. But we're seeing something very, very similar in Ireland. So I think there are good models. There's no one society getting it 100% right. The rate of change in society has been it's been exponential compared to any generation. Look at the amount of change within a year. The number of publications now in a year is probably 10 times what it was even 5 years ago. So the rate of change, the transformation, the digital age, we have to figure out how we're going to live within this. Our genes haven't changed. So think about it. The whole digital revolution has totally and utterly turned society upside down. Mm-hmm. We still have primarily the genes that we inherited 2 million, 4 million years ago. And those genes haven't changed, and they still require us to be physically active.
Okay.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.